in the heart of Iraq's scorching desert, where ancient ruins whisper secrets of forgotten gods, a chilling scream pierces the night. Nurse Amy Leatherin arrives at a remote archaeological dig, only to find herself trapped in a web of paranoia, betrayal, and murder. Wise Louise Leidner, the archaeologist's wife, haunted by visions of a ghostly figure. What curse lies buried in the unearthed Sumerian tablets, warning of divine vengeance? When Louise is found dead in a locked room, clutching a cursed amulet, Hercule Poirot steps into the shadows to unravel the truth. Is it an ancient deity's wrath or a human killer exploiting the myth? As bodies pile up and cryptic clues surface, one question burns: who among the dig's eclectic crew is weaving this deadly deception? Dive into a tale of suspense, where every relic hides a motive and every whisper could be your last. Chapter 1. Whispers of the desert. The desert stretched endlessly before Amy Leatherin, a vast, sun-scorched expanse of sand and secrets. The horizon shimmered, a cruel mirage that promised relief but delivered only heat. Her boots crunched against the gritty earth as she stepped from the rattling truck that had carried her from Baghdad to this forsaken archaeological dig in Hassani, Iraq. The year was 1930, and Amy, a nurse of practical disposition and sturdy resolve, had seen her share of hardship, but nothing in her training prepared her for the oppressive silence of this place, broken only by the faint whistle of wind through ancient ruins. She adjusted her wide-brimmed hat, shielding her eyes from the relentless sun. The driver, a wiry local named Hassan, pointed toward a cluster of canvas tents and mud brick huts nestled against a crumbling ziggurat. "That's the camp, miss," he said, his voice rough as the sand. "Dr. Leidner's waiting." Amy nodded, hefting her small suitcase, her only companion on this journey. She'd been hired to care for Louise Leidner, the archaeologist's wife, who was reportedly suffering from nerves. The details were vague, but the pay was good, and Amy wasn't one too shy from a challenge. As she approached the camp, the air grew heavier, not just with heat but with an intangible weight, as if the desert itself were watching. The dig site sprawled chaotically, piles of unearthed pottery, wooden scaffolding leaning precariously against stone walls, and a few workers in keffiyehs sifting through dirt. A tall, wiry man in khaki emerged from a tent, his face lined with exhaustion but his eyes sharp. "Miss Leatherin," he called, striding toward her. "I'm Eric Leidner. Welcome to Hassani." His handshake was firm but his smile flickered, betraying a man under strain. "Thank you, Dr. Leidner," Amy replied, her tone brisk but polite. "I understand your wife needs care." "Yes, Louise is delicate," he said, hesitating. "She's been unsettled since we arrived. The isolation, the work, it's taken a toll." His gaze drifted to the ruins, where a half-excavated wall loomed, etched with faded carvings. "Let me show you to your tent. You'll meet her soon." The camp was a microcosm of tension. Amy's tent, a canvas affair with a cot and a rickety table, sat on the edge of the site, offering a view of the ziggurat's jagged silhouette. As she unpacked her meager belongings, nursing kit, a change of clothes, a worn copy of Jane Eyre, she noticed the other team members. Richard Carey, the assistant archaeologist, was a handsome man with a disarming smile, but his eyes held a guarded edge as he sorted artifacts. Miss Ann Johnson, the team's epigraphist, was a wiry woman with a perpetual frown, scribbling notes with fierce concentration. A few others: Bill Coleman, a young surveyor with a cocky grin, and Sheila Riley, the sharp-tongued daughter of a local official, moved about, their interactions clipped and wary. At dusk, Amy was summoned to meet Louise Leidner. The archaeologist's wife was a vision, even in her distress. Her golden hair framed a face of delicate beauty, but her blue eyes darted nervously, as if expecting danger from the shadows. She sat in her tent, a silk scarf draped over her shoulders, surrounded by books and sketches of ancient Sumerian artifacts. "Miss Leatherin," she said, her voice soft but trembling, "I'm so glad you're here. I don't feel safe." Amy sat beside her, adopting the calm professional tone she'd honed in hospital wards. "I'm here to help, Mrs. Leidner. Tell me what's troubling you." Louise's fingers twisted the scarf. "It's this place. The desert, the ruins, they're alive in a way. I've seen things, shadows that don't belong. And the tablets we found, they speak of a curse, a vengeance for those who disturb the sacred ground." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I think it's watching me." Amy's practical nature bristled at talk of curses, but she couldn't dismiss the fear in Louise's eyes. "Have you seen anything specific?" she asked, keeping her tone steady. "Last week we uncovered a chamber," Louise said, her gaze distant, "sealed for thousands of years. Inside were tablets, inscribed with warnings. Those who trespass shall know the wrath of Enlil, they said. Enlil, a Sumerian god of storms and retribution. Since then, I've heard whispers at night, like voices chanting in a language I can't understand." Amy frowned, glancing at the tent's flap, where the desert night loomed black and impenetrable. Could it be the wind? The desert plays tricks. Louise shook her head. "It's not just the wind. Yesterday I found this." She reached into a drawer and produced a small, polished stone etched with angular cuneiform. "It was on my pillow. No one knows how it got there." Amy took the stone, its surface cool despite the day's heat. The symbols were unfamiliar, sharp and precise, as if carved yesterday. "Who else has access to your tent?" she asked. "Only Eric, and he swears he didn't place it there. The others, I don't trust them." Richard Carey looks at me strangely, and Miss Johnson, she hates me. I can tell. She thinks I'm a distraction to the work. Amy pocketed the stone, promising to keep it safe. "I'll stay close, Mrs. Leidner. We'll get to the bottom of this." Louise's grateful smile was a small victory, but as Amy left the tent, the desert's silence felt oppressive, broken only by a faint rhythmic sound like whispers carried on the wind. That night, Amy lay on her cot, the stone heavy in her pocket. Sleep eluded her, her mind replaying Louise's words. She'd dealt with nervous patients before, but this was different. The dig, the isolation, the talk of curses it gnawed at her pragmatism. As the hours crept by, she drifted into a restless doze, only to jolt awake. The whispers were real now, soft and insistent, coming from outside her tent. "Who's there?" she called, her voice sharp in the stillness. No answer. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, the beam cutting through the dark. The camp was still, the tents ghostly under the starlight. The whispers had stopped, but the air felt charged, as if the desert held its breath. She swept the flashlight across the ruins, catching a glint of something near the ziggurat, a fleeting shadow, gone before she could focus. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. She returned to her tent, locking the flap, and checked her belongings. The stone was still there, its symbols seeming to pulse in the dim light. Morning brought no relief. The team gathered for breakfast, a tense affair of coffee and flatbread. Dr. Leidner announced a new find, a clay tablet, larger than the others, unearthed near the chamber. Miss Johnson, her eyes bloodshot, translated its inscription. "It's another warning," she said, her voice flat. "The defiler shall perish under the god's gaze." "It's specific, almost personal," Carey scoffed. "Superstition. We're scientists, not priests." "Then explain the stone in Louise's tent," Miss Johnson snapped, "or the noises at night. Something's wrong here." Amy said nothing, her hand brushing the stone in her pocket. She caught Dr. Leidner's eye, his expression unreadable. The whispers, the shadow, the stone, they were pieces of a puzzle she didn't yet understand. But she resolved to watch closely, to protect Louise, and to uncover whatever truth lay buried in this cursed desert. As the day wore on, Amy shadowed Louise, noting the team's dynamics. Coleman flirted shamelessly with Sheila, who rebuffed him with cutting wit. Carey worked alone, his charm masking a brooding intensity. Miss Johnson buried herself in her notes, muttering about the tablets. Dr. Leidner, meanwhile, seemed distracted, his gaze often drifting to the ruins. By afternoon, Amy's suspicions grew. Someone in the camp was playing on Louise's fears, and the stone was no accident. She decided to keep it hidden, to study it later, perhaps with Miss Johnson's help. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire. Amy escorted Louise back to her tent, ensuring she took a mild sedative to calm her nerves. "You'll be safe tonight," Amy said, her voice firm. "I'll check on you before bed." Louise clutched her hand. "Thank you, Amy. I feel better, knowing you're here." Back in her own tent, Amy sat at the rickety table, the stone before her. She traced its symbols, her mind racing. Was it a prank, a threat, or something older, tied to the ruins themselves? The whispers returned, fainter now but unmistakable. She stood, flashlight in hand, ready to confront whatever lurked outside. But as she reached for the tent flap, she froze. Under her pillow, where she hadn't looked since morning, was another stone identical to the first, its cuneiform gleaming in the flashlight's beam. Her breath caught. Someone had been here, in her space, while she was with Louise. The desert's whispers grew louder, a chorus of unseen voices. And Amy Leatherin, practical nurse, felt the first stirrings of dread. She clutched the stones, her resolve hardening. Whatever game was being played, she would not be intimidated. Tomorrow, she would confront the team, starting with Dr. Leidner for now. She locked her tent, placed the stones in her nursing kit, and sat awake, listening to the desert's secrets, determined to unravel them before they claimed anyone else. Chapter 2. The shadow of fear. The sun hung low over the Whodunit dig site, painting the desert in hues of amber and gold, yet its warmth did little to dispel the unease that had settled over Amy Leatherin. Her first night in the camp had left her restless, the strange carved stone under her pillow weighing heavily on her mind. She had tucked it into her satchel, its jagged edges and unfamiliar symbols nagging at her like a half-remembered dream. As a nurse, Amy was accustomed to sleepless nights and the peculiarities of anxious patients. But this place, this desolate stretch of Iraqi desert, felt different. The air seemed to hum with secrets, and the whispers she'd heard in the night, though dismissed as wind, lingered in her thoughts. Morning brought no relief. Amy rose early, her boots crunching against the sandy earth as she made her way to the main tent where the archaeological team gathered for breakfast. The canvas structure was large but worn, its flaps fluttering in the faint breeze. Inside, the team was already assembled, their faces a mix of exhaustion and guarded curiosity. Dr. Eric Leitner, the expedition's leader, sat at the head of a makeshift table, his lean frame and sharp eyes commanding attention. Beside him, Louise Leitner, his wife and Amy's patient, picked at her food, her delicate features drawn with worry. The others Richard Carey, the charming assistant with a disarming smile, Miss Ann Johnson, the stern epigraphist with a perpetually furrowed brow, and a handful of local workers and junior archaeologists sat in near silence. The clink of tin cups and plates the only sound. Amy took her seat, nodding politely as Dr. Leitner introduced her formally. Miss Leatherin, our nurse, will be looking after Louise, he said, his voice steady but clipped, as though he were reciting a prepared line. Louise offered a weak smile, her blue eyes darting to Amy before returning to her plate. The team murmured acknowledgments, but Amy felt their scrutiny, as if she were an outsider intruding on a tightly knit group. She couldn't shake the sense that they were all watching each other, too, their glances sharp and fleeting. After breakfast, Amy accompanied Louise to her tent, a small but tidy space furnished with a cot, a wooden chair and a trunk overflowing with books and papers. Louise sat on the cot, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her golden hair catching the light filtering through the canvas. "I'm so glad you're here, nurse," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't feel safe, not anymore." Amy knelt beside her, adopting the calm, professional tone she'd honed over years of nursing. "You're under my care now, Mrs. Leitner. Whatever's troubling you, we'll sort it out together." "Why don't you tell me what's been happening?" Louise hesitated, her gaze flickering to the tent's entrance as if expecting someone to burst in. "It's the dig," she said at last. "Ever since we found that chamber, things have changed. I see things, shadows, figures, and the tablets. They speak of a curse. Norse and a Sumerian curse tied to this place. It's as if we've woken something." Amy frowned, her practical mind resisting the notion of curses. "A curse, you say? Have you seen these tablets yourself?" Louise nodded, her fingers trembling as she reached for a glass of water. "Eric showed me one. It was covered in cuneiform, warnings about disturbing sacred ground. Miss Johnson translated part of it. She said it spoke of vengeance, of a deity who punishes those who defile the temple." And then her voice broke, and she leaned closer, her eyes wide with fear. "I've been seeing him, a figure, cloaked in darkness, watching me. Last night, he was outside my tent." Amy's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression. "Neutra, did you get a good look at this figure? Could it have been one of the workers, perhaps, or someone from the camp?" No, it wasn't human, not entirely. It was wrong." Louise's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think it's tied to the curse. I think it wants me." Amy took Louise's hand, squeezing gently. "You've been under a lot of strain, Mrs. Leitner. This desert, the heat, the isolation, it can play tricks on the mind. I'll stay close, and we'll figure this out. No harm will come to you while I'm here." Louise's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her eyes remained haunted. Amy spent the morning tending to her, administering a mild sedative to ease her nerves and encouraging her to rest. As Louise dozed, Amy stepped outside, her thoughts racing. She didn't believe in curses, but Louise's fear was real, and the carved stone in her satchel suggested something tangible was at play. She resolved to keep a closer eye on the camp, to observe the team and their interactions. If there was a threat, it was likely human, not spectral. The afternoon brought Amy to the dig site itself, a sprawling network of trenches and partially uncovered ruins baking under the relentless sun. Dr. Leitner gave her a brief tour, his enthusiasm for the work evident despite the tension in the camp. "We're excavating what we believe is a Sumerian temple," he explained, pointing to a series of stone walls emerging from the earth. "The chamber we found last week is extraordinary, sealed for millennia, filled with relics, but it's caused some unrest among the team." Amy nodded, her eyes scanning the workers as they sifted through the sand. Richard Carey was nearby, directing a group of laborers with an easy confidence that bordered on arrogance. Miss Johnson stood apart, her notebook open as she meticulously recorded findings, her expression unreadable. "What kind of unrest?" Amy asked, keeping her tone casual. Dr. Leitner hesitated, his fingers brushing the brim of his hat. "Some of the workers believe we've angered the spirits of this place. Superstition, of course, but it spread to the team, and Louise, she's taken it to heart." Amy glanced at the chamber's entrance, a dark, narrow opening in the ground. "Have you found anything unusual in there? Anything that might explain these stories?" He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "The tablets, as I mentioned, they speak of a deity Inanna, perhaps, whose wrath is invoked by trespassers. Miss Johnson is still deciphering them, but they're unsettling to say the least." Before Amy could press further, a shout interrupted them. One of the workers, a wiry man named Hassan, emerged from a trench, holding a clay fragment aloft. "Another tablet, Doctor," he called, his voice tinged with excitement and fear. The team gathered as Miss Johnson took the fragment, her gloved hands turning it carefully. Amy caught a glimpse of the cuneiform, sharp and angular, before Miss Johnson tucked it into a protective case. "It's similar to the others," Miss Johnson said, her voice flat. "More warnings. We should proceed cautiously." Carey snorted, brushing sand from his sleeves. "Cautiously. We're archaeologists, and not priests. If we stopped for every ominous scribble, we'd never get anywhere." Miss Johnson's lips tightened, but she said nothing, returning to a notebook. Amy watched the exchange, noting the undercurrent of hostility. Kara's charm masked a sharp edge, and Miss Johnson's reserve seemed to hide something deeper, resentment perhaps, or fear. Dr. Leitner, meanwhile, seemed distracted, his gaze fixed on the chamber's entrance as if expecting something to emerge. That evening, as the team dined together, the mood was strained. Louise joined them, her face pale but composed, though she flinched at sudden noises. Amy sat beside her, her eyes scanning the group for any sign of deceit. The conversation turned to the tablets, with Carrie arguing they should be shipped to a museum for study, while Miss Johnson insisted they remain on site until fully translated. Dr. Leitner mediated, his voice calm but firm, though Amy noticed his hands trembling slightly as he poured his tea. As the meal ended, Louise excused herself, and Amy followed her to her tent. Inside, Louise's composure crumbled. "It's getting worse," she whispered, clutching Amy's arm. "I found this today." She produced a folded piece of paper, its edges worn and stained. Amy unfolded it, her heart sinking as she saw the writing, angular cuneiform-like symbols, arranged in a way that suggested a message. It was no language Amy recognized, but the intent was clear, a threat, scrawled in what looked like dried blood. "Where did you find this?" Amy asked, her voice steady despite the chill running through her. "Slipped under my door," Louise said, her eyes filling with tears. "It's him, the figure. He knows I'm here, and he's coming for me." Amy's mind raced. The letter could be a prank, a cruel joke by someone in the camp, but the fear in Louise's eyes was undeniable. She folded the paper carefully, tucking it into her pocket. "I'll keep this safe," she said, "and I'll speak to Dr. Leitner about it. We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise." Louise nodded, her shoulders shaking as she sank onto the cot. Amy stayed with her until she fell asleep, the sedative taking effect. Stepping outside, Amy scanned the camp, the darkness pressing in around the flickering lanterns. The desert was silent now, but the weight of unseen eyes lingered. She returned to her own tent, locking the letter in her medical kit alongside the carved stone. Her nurse's instinct told her to stay rational, but the pieces of this puzzle, the stone, the letter, Louise's visions were beginning to form a troubling picture. Over the next few days, Amy observed the team closely, her suspicions growing. Kara's charm seemed calculated, his interactions with Louise overly familiar, earning sharp looks from Dr. Leitner. Miss Johnson, meanwhile, was often found near the chamber, her demeanor guarded as she pored over the tablets. Amy caught snippets of arguments, Gary accusing Miss Johnson of delaying the dig, Miss Johnson retorting that he cared more for fame than science. Dr. Leitner, for his part, seemed increasingly withdrawn, his eyes haunted as he spoke of the relic's importance. One afternoon, Amy approached Miss Johnson, hoping to learn more about the tablets. The epigraphist was seated outside the main tent, her notebook filled with sketches of cuneiform. "Miss Johnson," Amy began, "Mrs. Leitner mentioned the tablets speak of a curse. Can you tell me more?" Miss Johnson's eyes flicked up, her expression wary. "Their warnings, nurse. Ancient Sumerians often inscribed protective spells on sacred sites. These mention Inanna's wrath, a punishment for those who disturb her rest. But it's folklore, nothing more." "Mrs. Leitner seems to believe it's real," Amy pressed. "And that letter she received, could someone be using the tablets to scare her?" Miss Johnson's pen paused, her lips pursing. "Someone could, I suppose. There are always those who exploit fear for their own ends." She closed her notebook abruptly, standing. "Excuse me, I have work to do." Amy watched her go, her suspicions deepening. Miss Johnson's evasiveness suggested she knew more than she let on. That evening, Amy spoke to Dr. Leitner about the letter, showing it to him in private. His face paled as he examined it, his fingers tracing the symbols. This resembles the script on the tablets," he said, his voice unsteady. "But it's impossible. No one here could replicate this." "Someone did," Amy said, firmly, "and I intend to find out who." Dr. Leitner nodded, his expression grim. "I'll speak to the team. We'll increase patrols around the camp. But please, nurse, keep this quiet for now." "Louise is fragile enough," Amy agreed, though her resolve hardened. She spent her evenings patrolling the camp, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The workers whispered among themselves, their eyes darting to the ruins as if expecting something to emerge. Amy felt the weight of their fear, but she refused to let it sway her. She was here to protect Louise, and she would not fail. By the end of the week, Louise's condition had worsened. She refused to leave her tent, her dreams plagued by visions of the cloaked figure. Amy administered stronger sedatives, but they did little to quell her patient's terror. One night, as Amy sat by Louise's bedside, a faint scratching sound came from outside the tent. She froze, her hand tightening around her flashlight. The sound stopped, then resumed a deliberate, rhythmic scrape, like nails on canvas. Amy stepped outside, her beam sweeping the darkness. The camp was still, the lanterns casting long shadows across the sand. She moved toward the ruins, her heart pounding, and caught a glimpse of movement, a fleeting shape, too quick to identify. She called out, her voice sharp in the silence, but no one answered. Returning to Louise's tent, she found her patient awake, her eyes wide with terror. "It was him," Louise whispered. "He's here." Amy stayed with her through the night, her mind racing. The letter, the stone, the figure, someone was orchestrating this fear, and she was determined to uncover the truth. She locked the tent's flap, her hand resting on the medical kit where the letter and stone lay hidden. Tomorrow, she would confront the team, demand answers, and protect Louise at all costs. The desert might hold its secrets, but Amy Leatherin was not one to back down from a challenge. Chapter 3. The face at the window. The desert air clung to Amy Leatherin like a second skin, heavy with heat and the faint grit of sand that seemed to infiltrate every breath. The archaeological dig at Hassani, Iraq, sprawled before her, a patchwork of tents and excavated trenches under the relentless sun. It was her third day at the site, and already the tension among the team felt as palpable as the shimmering haze on the horizon. Louise Leidner, her patient, had not slept well, her delicate features drawn tight with fear as she whispered of omens and curses. Amy, ever practical, had tried to soothe her, but the unease in the camp was infectious, creeping into her own thoughts like the shadows lengthening across the dunes. The morning began with routine. Amy prepared a tray of tea and biscuits, navigating the narrow path between tents to reach Louise's quarters. The canvas flapped gently in the breeze, a stark contrast to the stillness that seemed to suffocate the camp at night. Inside, Louise sat on her cot, her blonde hair disheveled, her eyes darting to the window as if expecting something or someone to appear. "Amy, you must think me mad," Louise said, her voice trembling as she clutched a shawl around her shoulders. "But I saw him again last night. At the window, his face. It was Frederick's. I swear it. My husband, my first husband." Amy set the tray down, her nurse's training keeping her expression calm despite the chill that ran through her. Frederick Bosner, Louise's first husband, was a shadowy figure in the stories she'd shared, a German spy she'd betrayed during the war, a man presumed dead. Yet Louise's conviction was unshakable, her fear raw and visceral. "Mrs. Leidner, you're overtired," Amy said gently, pouring tea. "The desert plays tricks on the eyes. Shadows, reflections, it's easy to see what isn't there." Louise shook her head, her fingers twisting the shawl. "No, Amy, it was him, his eyes. They were so cold, so accusing. He knows what I did. He knows I betrayed him to the authorities. And now, with this curse, with these tablets we've dug up, he's come back to punish me." Amy frowned, glancing at the window. It was small, barely large enough for a face to peer through, and covered with a thin muslin curtain that stirred faintly in the breeze. The idea of a ghostly apparition seemed absurd in the bright daylight, but Louise's terror was undeniable. "Have you told Dr. Leidner about this?" Amy asked, keeping her tone neutral. Louise hesitated, her gaze dropping to her lap. "Eric, he thinks I'm imagining things. He's so focused on the dig, on those wretched tablets. He says they're a find of a lifetime, but I know they're cursed. The cuneiform, the warnings, they speak of vengeance." "Amy, vengeance for disturbing the dead?" Amy nodded, unsure how to respond. She'd overheard snippets of conversation among the team. Dr. Eric Leitner, the expedition leader, was obsessed with the recent discovery of a hidden chamber filled with Sumerian relics. Miss Johnson, the stern epigraphist, had been poring over the tablets, muttering about their ominous inscriptions. Richard Carey, the charming assistant archaeologist, seemed more skeptical, dismissing the curse talk as superstition. Yet the atmosphere in the camp was charged, as if the very sand held its breath, waiting for something to break. "I'll speak to Dr. Leidner about extra precautions," Amy said, patting Louise's hand. "Maybe we can have someone patrol the camp at night. Would that help you feel safer?" Louise managed a weak smile. "You're kind, Amy. Yes, that might help, but please, don't leave me alone tonight." Amy promised to stay close, her mind already turning to the practicalities of her role. She was a nurse, not a detective, but Louise's fear was so intense that Amy felt compelled to act. After settling Louise with her tea, she stepped outside, the sun blinding her momentarily. As she scanned the camp, workers bustled about, hauling buckets of earth from the trenches, their voices a low hum against the wind. The ruins themselves loomed nearby, jagged stone walls half buried in the sand, their ancient secrets guarded by time. As she walked toward the main tent, Amy spotted Richard Carey leaning against a crate, his hat tilted back as he sipped water from a canteen. His easy smile greeted her, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that made her wary. "Morning, Nurse Leatherin," he called. "How's our resident damsel in distress?" "She's frightened," Amy replied, choosing her words carefully. "She thinks she saw someone at her window last night, someone from her past." Carey raised an eyebrow, his smile fading. "Her past? You mean that spy business she's always on about? Poor woman's got a vivid imagination. Probably just a shadow from one of those palm trees." Amy bristled at his dismissive tone but kept her composure. "Maybe, but she's convinced it's real. And with all this talk of a curse, It's no wonder she's on edge. Carrie shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. The curse is just local lore, whipped up by the workers to spook us. Those tablets are valuable, sure, but they're not haunted. Leidner's got enough on his plate without chasing ghosts. Amy nodded, unconvinced, and continued to the main tent, where Dr. Leidner was hunched over a table covered with maps and photographs of the relics. His glasses perched on his nose, his face etched with the strain of leadership. Dr. Leidner, Amy began. Mrs. Leidner is quite upset. She's talking about seeing her first husband's face at her window. I think we should consider extra security at night, just to ease her mind. Leidner looked up, his expression wary. Amy, I appreciate your concern, but Louise has always been sensitive. These visions of hers, they're not new. The desert, the isolation, it gets to people. I'll have a word with the workers. Make sure no one's wandering near her tent at night. Amy pressed further. She mentioned the tablets, too. The curse. Could there be something in those inscriptions that's upsetting her? Leidner sighed, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. The tablets are extraordinary, Amy. They date back to the Sumerian period, possibly older. Miss Johnson's translations suggest warnings about disturbing sacred ground, but it's all metaphorical, ancient priests scaring off grave robbers. There's no curse, just human imagination running wild. Amy left the tent, feeling dismissed but determined. The day passed in a blur of nursing duties, checking Louise's pulse, ensuring she ate, and listening to a ramble about the spectral figure. By evening, the camp settled into an uneasy quiet, the workers retreating to their tents as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire and shadow. Unable to shake Louise's words, Amy decided to patrol the camp herself that night, armed with a flashlight and a shawl against the chill. She moved silently past the tents, her boots crunching softly on the sand. The ruins loomed in the distance, their silhouettes jagged against the starlit sky. As she neared Louise's tent, she paused, her heart quickening. A faint sound, a rustle, like fabric brushing stone, came from the direction of the ruins. Amy swung her flashlight toward the sound, its beam cutting through the darkness. For a moment she saw nothing but sand and stone. Then, a flicker of movement, a shadow darting behind a crumbled wall. Her pulse raced as she stepped closer, her light sweeping the area. "Who's there?" she called, her voice sharper than she intended. No answer came, only the whisper of the wind. Amy hesitated, torn between returning to the safety of her tent and investigating further. Curiosity won out. She crept toward the ruins, her flashlight illuminating the uneven ground. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the stones themselves exhaled an ancient weight. Near the entrance to the hidden chamber, she stopped, her beam catching something etched into the sand, a footprint, fresh and deliberate, leading toward the shadows. Amy's breath caught. She wasn't alone. She backed away, her light trembling in her grip, and hurried back to the camp, her mind racing with questions. Was it a worker, a thief, or something else, something tied to Louise's fears? She resolved not to alarm Louise until she had more answers. But sleep eluded her that night, the memory of the shadow lingering like a specter. The next morning the camp buzzed with new activity. A worker, a wiry man named Hassan, approached Dr. Leitner with a findiclate tablet unearthed near the chamber, its surface carved with intricate symbols. Amy watched as Miss Johnson, her face pale and drawn, examined it under a magnifying glass. "It's remarkable," Miss Johnson muttered, her voice tinged with unease. "This depicts a deity Inanna, perhaps, but the imagery, it's vengeful. A figure with a raised blade, blood at its feet. It's a warning." Dr. Leidner frowned, his fingers tracing the tablet's edges. "A warning, yes, but not supernatural. These were meant to deter looters. We must catalogue it carefully." Amy glanced at Louise, who stood nearby, her face ashen. "It's the curse," Louise whispered, clutching Amy's arm. "It's real. That face at the window, it's all connected." The workers murmured among themselves, their voices low and fearful. Amy felt the weight of their stares, the growing sense that the camp was unraveling. She pulled Dr. Leidner aside once more. "Sir, I saw something last night near the ruins, a shadow and a footprint. We need to do something, set up a watch, anything. Mrs. Leidner can't go on like this." Leidner's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "Very well, Amy. I'll organize a patrol starting tonight. We can't have people sneaking around fueling these rumors. Thank you for your vigilance." Amy felt a small surge of relief, a sense that she'd taken a step toward protecting Louise. But as she returned to her patient's side, the image of the shadow lingered, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. The day wore on, filled with the clatter of tools and the hum of voices, but the unease in the camp only grew, like a storm gathering on the horizon. That afternoon, Amy sat with Louise, reading to her from a war novel to distract her. The words blurred together, her mind drifting to the footprint, the tablet, the shadow. Louise's hand rested on hers, trembling slightly. "Amy," she said softly, "if anything happens to me, promise you'll find out the truth. Don't let them say it was just my imagination." Amy squeezed her hand, her resolve hardening. "I promise, Mrs. Leidner, I'll keep my eyes open." As night fell, the camp settled into a tense quiet. The new patrol, 2 workers armed with lanterns circling the perimeter. Amy stayed near Louise's tent, her flashlight at the ready, her senses alert. The desert was silent, save for the occasional howl of the wind, but the weight of unseen eyes pressed against her. She couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow she'd seen was no mere trick of the light, that something or someone was watching, waiting for the moment to strike. The hours passed slowly, the stars bright overhead. Amy's thoughts churned, piecing together the fragments of the past days: Louise's fear, the tablets, the shadow, the footprint. She didn't believe in curses, but she couldn't deny the malevolence that seemed to seep from the ruins, entwining itself with the human tensions in the camp. As she sat by Louise's tent, her flashlight casting a small circle of light, she made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, whatever it took. The night stretched on, and Amy's eyelids grew heavy, but she forced herself to stay awake. Her grip tight on the flashlight, the desert held its secrets close, but she was determined to shine a light into its shadows, to protect Louise and unravel the mystery that threatened to consume them all. Chapter 4. Blood on the sand. The sun hung low over the Hassani dig, casting long jagged shadows across the sand like the claws of some ancient beast. Nurse Amy Letherin wiped sweat from her brow, her starched uniform clinging uncomfortably to her skin. The desert heat was relentless, but it was the atmosphere within the camp that weighed heavier on her today. Louise Leidner's terror had grown palpable, her eyes darting at every sound, her hands trembling as she clutched Amy's arm during their morning walk. The talk of the curse, those cryptic tablets, and the ghostly face at the window had infected the entire team with unease. Even the workers, usually chatter-filled, moved in hushed silence, their picks striking the earth with a rhythm that felt like a countdown. Amy had spent the morning tending to Louise in her tent, administering a mild sedative to calm her nerves. Louise had rambled about the face she'd seen, pale, accusing, with eyes that burned through the darkness. "It was Frederick," she'd whispered, her voice cracking. "My Frederick, come back to punish me." Amy had listened patiently, though her practical mind rebelled against such fancies. Frederick Bosner, Louise's first husband, was dead, executed as a spy years ago, or so the story went. Yet Louise's fear was real, and Amy couldn't shake the image of that fleeting shadow she'd seen near the ruins the previous night. It had moved too swiftly, too deliberately, to be a trick of the moonlight. By noon, Amy had left Louise resting and stepped outside to fetch water from the camp's supply. The dig site sprawled before her, a maze of trenches and scaffolding, dotted with tents and the looming silhouette of the ziggurat ruins. Richard Carey, Dr. Leidner's assistant, was overseeing workers near the main trench, his tanned face set in concentration. Miss Johnson, the epigraphist, sat under a canopy, poring over a clay tablet with a magnifying glass, her lips pursed in disapproval. Amy caught snatches of their conversation, something about moving the relics to a safer storage, but the wind carried their words away. She was halfway back to Louise's tent when a scream tore through the camp. It was raw, primal, and it stopped Amy in her tracks, the water jug slipping from her hands and shattering on the ground. The sound came from Louise's tent. Amy's heart pounded as she sprinted across the sand, her nurse's instincts kicking in. She burst through the tent, flap, calling, "Mrs. Leidner, Louise, what's wrong?" Silence greeted her. The tent was dim, the canvas walls muting the harsh sunlight. Louise lay on her cot, unnaturally still, her golden hair fanned across the pillow. Amy's breath caught as she approached, her eyes scanning for signs of life. Louise's chest didn't rise. Her hands, folded across her stomach, clutched a small objective Sumerian amulet, its carved surface glinting faintly. A single drop of blood, stark against the pale sand floor, lay beneath the cot's edge. "Louise," Amy whispered, though she already knew. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she checked for a pulse. The skin was cool, the wrist limp. Louise Leidner was dead. Amy staggered back, her mind racing. She'd only been gone 20 minutes. How could this happen? The tent flap had been tied shut, the windows secured. She forced herself to think like a nurse, to observe. The amulet in Louise's hand was unfamiliar, its design intricate, almost menacing. The blood drop was fresh, its edges not yet congealed. There was no wound on Louise's body, no sign of struggle. The sedative bottle on the bedside table was untouched, the glass of water beside it half full. A shout from outside snapped Amy from her daze. Richard Carey's voice, sharp with alarm. "What's happened?" "I heard a scream." He burst into the tent, his hat askew, followed by Miss Johnson and Dr. Leidner, whose face drained of color as he saw his wife, Louise. Dr. Leidner cried, rushing to her side. He fell to his knees, grasping her hand, the amulet tumbling to the floor. "No, no, my darling." His voice broke, and Amy, despite her shock, felt a pang of pity for him. Miss Johnson stood frozen, her hand over her mouth. "Is she whispered. Amy nodded, her throat tight. "She's gone. I don't know how." Carey's jaw tightened. "We need to secure the tent. No one touches anything until we understand what happened." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed fear. Dr. Leidner looked up, his face a mask of grief. "The curse," he murmured. "It's taken her. I should have listened." Amy wanted to protest, to insist on reason, but the words stuck in her throat. The amulet, the blood, the locked tent, it all felt wrong, staged, like a scene from one of those Gothic novels she'd read as a girl. She stepped outside, gulping the dry air as the camp erupted into chaos. Workers gathered, whispering in Arabic, their eyes wide with superstition. Sheila Riley, the young daughter of a local archaeologist, hovered at the edge of the crowd, her notebook clutched to her chest. The afternoon blurred into a haze of activity. Dr. Leidner refused to leave Louise's side, so Carrie took charge, ordering the workers to stay clear of the tent. Miss Johnson retreated to her own quarters, claiming a headache, though Amy noticed her hands shaking. Amy herself felt adrift, her failure to protect Louise gnawing at her. She'd promised to keep her safe, and now, by evening, word had reached the nearby town, and an unexpected visitor arrived. Amy was sitting outside the mess tent, staring at the horizon, when a small, dapper figure approached, his mustache impeccably waxed, his suit incongruous amid the desert dust. He carried a walking stick, though his step was brisk. "Mademoiselle," he said, bowing slightly, "I am Hercule Poirot. I was concluding a matter in Syria when news of this tragedy reached me. May I offer my assistance?" Amy blinked, startled. She'd heard of Poirot, the famous detective whose name appeared in newspapers alongside sensational cases. "Mr. Poirot," she stammered, "I'm Amy Leatherin, the nurse here. Mrs. Leitner, she's dead. We don't know how." Poirot's green eyes, sharp as a cat's, studied her. "Then we shall find out. Mademoiselle Leatherin, take me to the scene, if you please." Amy led him to Louise's tent, now guarded by a worker. Dr. Leidner had been persuaded to rest, leaving the body undisturbed. Poirot stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the room with clinical precision. He knelt by the cot, examining the blood, drop without touching it, then picked up the amulet with a handkerchief, turning it in the lamplight. "Curio," he murmured. "This amulet, it is not placed naturally in her hand. No, it is as if someone wished it to be seen." Amy frowned. "You think it was staged?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "I think nothing yet, mademoiselle, I observe. A single drop of blood, no wound, a locked tensest interestant, and this amulet, Sumerian, yes. Yet its edges are too sharp, too new, perhaps." He moved to the window, inspecting the canvas. Flap. No tears, no signs of entry. The flap was tied from inside, you say? "Yes," Amy confirmed. "I had to untie it to get in." Poirot nodded, his fingers tapping his walking stick. "And the scream, who heard it?" "I did," Amy said. "It was loud, desperate. Others heard it, too, Mr. Carey, Miss Johnson, some workers. Bon, we shall speak with them all. But first, tell me of Madame Leidner, her fears, her visions, this talk of a curse." Amy recounted everything. Louise's paranoia, the ghostly face, the threatening letter, the tablet's warning of vengeance. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted, as if assembling a puzzle in his mind. When she finished, he clapped his hands. "Mademoiselle, you are a most valuable witness. Your observations, they are clear, precise. You will assist me." "Yes." Amy hesitated, her guilt resurfacing. "I couldn't save her, Mr. Poirot. I let her down." Poirot's expression softened. None, mademoiselle. You did your duty. Now, you will help me bring justice to her memory. This I promise." His confidence steadied her, and Amy nodded. "What do we do first?" "We begin with the facts," Poirot said. "The tent, the amulet, the blood, these are our clues, and we shall learn who among this company had reason to wish Madame Leidner dead." The investigation began in earnest the next morning. Poirot gathered the team in the mess tent, his presence commanding despite his small stature. Dr. Leidner, red-eyed but composed, sat at the head of the table. Carrie leaned against the post, arms crossed, while Miss Johnson fidgeted with her glasses. Sheila Riley lingered at the back, scribbling in her notebook. The workers, excluded from the meeting, watched from a distance. Miss Poirot began. "A terrible crime has occurred. Madame Leidner was murdered, and we must discover by whom. I ask for your cooperation. First, where were you all at the time of the scream?" Carrie spoke first. "I was at the main trench, directing the workers. I heard the scream and ran to the tent." Miss Johnson nodded. "I was at my table studying a tablet. I followed Richard, Mr. Carey, when I heard it." Dr. Leidner's voice was hoarse. "I was in my office cataloging finds. I didn't hear the scream until I stepped outside." Sheila piped up. "I was sketching the zig. I didn't hear anything, but I saw people running toward the tent." Poirot's eyes flicked from face to face, reading their expressions. "And none of you saw anyone near Madame Leidner's tent before the scream?" Silence. Amy, standing beside Poirot, recalled the shadow she'd seen the previous night but held her tongue. She'd already told him privately. "Very well," Poirot said. "I will examine the tent again, and I ask that no one enters it. Mademoiselle Leatherin, you will accompany me." As they returned to the tent, Amy felt a flicker of purpose. Poirot's methodical approach was a lifeline, pulling her from the chaos of guilt and fear. He knelt by the blood drop again, this time using a small magnifying glass. "This blood," he said, "it is curious. One drop, no more, and no source on the body. It suggests a message, perhaps." "A message?" Amy echoed. "We a killer who wishes us to think of violence, yet leaves no mark. It is theatrical, Nan." He moved to the amulet, still wrapped in his handkerchief. "This, too, is theatrical. Its design is Sumerian, but the craftsmanship, that lacks the wear of age. A forgery, I suspect, meant to fuel this cursed nonsense." Amy's mind raced. "You think someone planned this? Made it look like the curse killed her?" Poirot smiled faintly. "You begin to think like Poirot, mademoiselle. Now let us consider motive. Who benefits from Madame Leidner's death?" Amy hesitated. "Dr. Leidner loved her. He's devastated. But there's tension in the team. Mr. Carey and Miss Johnson argued about the relics. And Louise, she was afraid of someone from her past. Presentiment. Her past. This Frederick Bosner. The curse, all are threads in the same tapestry. We must unravel them." The day wore on, with Poirot questioning the team individually. Amy shadowed him, taking mental notes. Carey admitted to finding Louise difficult, but insisted he respected her. Miss Johnson revealed Louise's flirtations with Carey had caused friction, though she claimed it didn't bother her. Dr. Leidner spoke of his wife's beauty and fragility, breaking down as he described their life together. By evening, Amy was exhausted but determined. She sat with Poirot in the mess tent, sipping tea as he reviewed his notes. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you have seen this camp through clear eyes. Tell me, who do you trust?" Amy thought carefully. "Mr. Carey seems honest, but he's hiding something. Miss Johnson is prickly, but I don't think she'd kill Dr. Leidner. He's grieving, but his obsession with the dig worries me. Sheila's just a bystander." I think Poirot nodded. "Your instincts are sound. Tomorrow, we dig deeper into their secrets, their lies. For now, rest. A clear mind is our greatest weapon." Amy returned to her tent, the carved stone from her pillow still tucked in her pocket. She examined it under her lamp, its symbols eerie in the flickering light. As she drifted to sleep, the desert's whispers returned, soft and insistent, carrying the weight of secrets yet to be unearthed. The following days brought no breakthroughs, only mounting tension. Poirot pored over the tent's contents, finding nothing new. The blood drop baffled him. No matching source was found on Louise or in the tent. The amulet, sent to a local expert, was confirmed as a modern creation, its clay too fresh to be ancient. The team grew restless, their work stalled by the investigation. Amy overheard arguments, Carey accusing Miss Johnson of mishandling relics, Dr. Leidner snapping at workers for spreading curse rumors. One afternoon, Amy found herself alone in Louise's tent, tidying the space out of habit. She paused by the bedside table, her eyes falling on the water glass. Something glinted at the bottom, a faint residue, almost invisible. She froze, recalling the sedative bottle's untouched state. Had Louise been poisoned? She wrapped the glass in a cloth and rushed to Poirot. He examined it under his magnifying glass, his expression grave. "This residue, it may be significant. We must test it, but discreetly. If it is poison, the killer is clever indeed." The glass was sent to a chemist in town, with results promised in days. Amy felt a surge of hope finally, a tangible clue. But that night, the camp's unease peaked. A worker claimed to see a figure in the ruins, chanting in an unknown tongue. The story spread, and by morning, half the workers had fled, fearing the curse's wrath. Poirot remained unfazed, his focus on the team. He summoned Amy to the hidden chamber where the cursed tablets had been found. The air was cool and musty, the walls etched with cuneiform. Poirot traced the inscriptions, his finger pausing on a symbol. "This warning," he said, "speaks of betrayal. Not divine, but human. Madame Leidner betrayed someone, or was betrayed. This is the heart of our mystery." Amy nodded, her mind turning to Louise's diary, which she'd glimpsed but not read. "She kept a diary," she said. "It might hold answers." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Excellent. Find it, mademoiselle, but tell no one." Amy slipped into Louise's tent that evening, her heart pounding. The diary was hidden in a trunk, its pages filled with Louise's elegant script. She skimmed entries, finding references to Bosner, guilt over his fate, and fear of his return. One passage stood out: "The truth is hidden in the sand, but it will destroy us all." She tucked the diary under her shirt and returned to Poirot, who read it by lamplight. "This confirms much," he said. "Madame Leidner believed her past pursued her, but was it Bosner or someone using his name?" The chemist report arrived the next day. The glass contained traces of a rare poison, undetectable in small doses but lethal over time. Poirot's face darkened. The killer planned this carefully. The blood dropped, the amulet, these were distractions. The poison was the true weapon. Amy felt sick. Who could do this, and why? Poirot tapped his temple. "The little grey cells, they work. We are close, mademoiselle. The killer is among us, and they will strike again if we do not act." The investigation intensified. Poirot watched the team like a hawk, noting their interactions. Amy, now his unofficial deputy, kept her eyes open. She noticed Carey avoiding Miss Johnson, Dr. Leidner lingering near the chamber. Sheila sketching the same ruin obsessively. Each seemed to carry a secret, but which held the key? One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of crimson, Amy walked the camp's perimeter, her thoughts heavy. The desert stretched endlessly, its silence both soothing and oppressive. She paused by the ziggurat, its steps worn by millennia. A soft crunch of sand made her turn. No one was there, but the air felt charged, as if the desert itself watched. She returned to her tent, the diary's words echoing, "The truth is hidden in the sand." As she lay down, the carved stone in her pocket pressed against her hip, a reminder that the curse, real or not, had claimed its first victim and might not stop there. Chapter 5. Secrets in the dust. The sun hung low over the Hassani dig site, casting long shadows across the sand-swept ruins. Amy Leatherin adjusted her wide-brimmed hat, shielding her eyes from the relentless glare as she stepped out of her tent. The air was thick with the dry, earthy scent of the desert, mingled with the faint tang of dust kicked up by the morning's activities. Louise Leidener's death the previous day had left the camp in a state of uneasy quiet, as if the very ruins held their breath. The team moved with mechanical precision, their usual chatter replaced by curt exchanges and sidelong glances. Amy felt the weight of their collective grief and suspicion pressing against her chest, a knot of unease she couldn't untangle. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his pressed linen suit despite the heat, stood near the excavation site, his sharp eyes scanning the scattered tools and crates. His presence was a small comfort to Amy, a beacon of clarity in the murk of fear that had settled over the camp. She approached him, her boots crunching softly on the gritty path. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Have you found anything new?" Poirot turned, his mustache twitching slightly as he offered a measured nod. "Mademoiselle Leatherin, the scene of a crime is like a book, every detail a word, every clue a sentence. We have only begun to read." He gestured toward the tent, where Louise had been found, its canvas flap now sealed with a makeshift lock. The amulet in Madame Leidener's hand, the single drop of blood. "These are not accidents. They are deliberate punctuation in a story someone wishes us to believe." Amy frowned, recalling the eerie Sumerian amulet clutched in Louise's stiff fingers. Its carved surface, etched with spiraling symbols, had seemed almost alive in the dim light of the tent. "You think the killer placed it there to make us believe in this cursed nonsense?" "Precisely," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But the question is why? To distract, to terrify, or perhaps to point us toward a truth they do not expect us to see." He tapped his temple lightly. "The little gray cells. They are at work. And you, mademoiselle, you must be my eyes and ears among this eclectic company." Amy nodded, squaring her shoulders. She had failed to protect Louise, but she would not fail Poirot. "I'll keep watch," she promised, her gaze drifting to the team members scattered across the site. Richard Carey, the handsome assistant, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, was cataloguing artifacts with a distracted air. Miss Johnson, the stern epigraphist, hunched over a table, her pencil scratching furiously at a notebook. Dr. Leidener, pale and withdrawn, stood apart staring at the horizon as if it held answers the ruins could not. Each seemed to carry a secret, and Amy felt the weight of her task settle deeper. The morning passed in a blur of routine. Amy busied herself organizing medical supplies, her hands moving automatically while her mind churned. Louise's diary, discovered late the previous night, lay hidden in her satchel, its pages filled with cryptic references to her past. Amy hadn't had time to read it fully, but one phrase had lodged in her memory. "The shadow knows my sin." Was it a reference to Frederick Bosner, Louise's first husband, whose ghostly face she claimed to have seen, or something else entirely? Amy resolved to share it with Poirot, but not until she could make sense of it herself. By noon, the heat was oppressive, driving the team to seek shade. Amy joined Poirot in the main tent, where he had spread out a map of the dig site, dotted with markers for each key location: the hidden chamber, Louise's tent, the artifact storage, the killer. Poirot said, tracing a finger along the map. "Knew Madame Leidener's habits. The locked room. It is not a mystery of impossibility, but of opportunity. Someone close, someone trusted." Amy hesitated, then spoke. "I found something last night. Louise's diary. She wrote about her past, about Bosner. She thought he was dead. But what if he isn't?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, a spark of interest flaring. "A diary. This is most significant. You will show it to me?" "Yes, of course," Amy said, retrieving the small leather-bound book from her satchel. She handed it to Poirot, who flipped through its pages with delicate precision. His lips pursed. "She mentions a hidden truth," Amy added. "Something about betrayal and the curse being tied to her past." Poirot paused at a page, his finger resting on a line of hurried script. "He watches from the shadows and the stones, but speaker's name, intriguing. This suggests Madame Leidener believed her past had followed her here." He closed the diary, tucking it into his pocket. "We must proceed with care, mademoiselle. A killer who weaves such a tale is cunning, and we are not yet at the end of their story." As they spoke, a shout from outside broke the stillness. Amy and Poirot hurried out to find the team gathered near the hidden chamber, a sunken pit where the cursed tablets had been unearthed. Richard Carey stood at the edge, his face pale as he pointed to a pile of freshly turned earth. "We found something," he said, his voice tight. "Another tablet, but this one's different." Amy peered into the pit, where a worker carefully brushed dirt from a clay slab. Its surface was etched with jagged angular symbols, unlike the smooth cuneiform of the others. Miss Johnson knelt beside it, her usual composure frayed. "This isn't Sumerian," she said, her voice low. "It's older. Akkadian, perhaps. The symbols suggest a ritual, a binding or a summoning." Dr. Leidner joined them. His eyes hollow. "We should stop digging," he said abruptly. "This place is cursed. Louise warned us." And now his voice broke, and he turned away, shoulders shaking. Poirot stepped forward, his calm authority cutting through the tension. "Monsieur Leidner, the curse is a tale told by men, not gods. This tablet it is. A clue, not a condemnation. We will examine it." He gestured to the worker to lift it carefully, and Amy noticed Carey's hands tremble as he helped secure it in a crate. The discovery sent ripples through the camp. Whispers of the curse grew louder, and Amy caught snippets of arguments as she moved among the team. Carey and Miss Johnson clashed over whether to halt the dig, while Sheila Riley, the local archaeologist's daughter, lingered nearby, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. Sheila, with her quick wit and bold demeanor, had been a peripheral figure until now, but Amy sensed she knew more than she let on. As evening fell, a sandstorm rolled in from the west, its howling winds rattling the tents and cloaking the ruins in a haze of dust. The team retreated to the main tent, where Poirot had set up a makeshift office. Amy sat beside him, watching as he studied the new tablet under lamplight, his magnifying glass catching the faint glow. "These symbols," he murmured, "they are not a curse but a contract. A promise of vengeance, perhaps, but written by a human hand." Amy leaned closer, her curiosity piqued. "You think someone forged it? To scare us, or to misdirect?" Poirot said. "The killer wishes us to see spirits where there are only shadows. But shadows, mademoiselle, have a source. We must find it." The storm grew fiercer, the tense canvas flapping like a trapped bird. Amy's thoughts drifted to Louise's diary, its words echoing in her mind. She was about to mention it again when a low, guttural sound cut through the wind, a moan, almost human, rising from the direction of the ruins. The team froze, eyes wide. Sheila Riley crossed herself, muttering a prayer, while Carey gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "It's just the storm," Amy said, though her voice wavered. She stood, grabbing a lantern, and stepped toward the tent flap. "I'll check." Poirot's hand shot out, stopping her. "Nan, mademoiselle, we go together." His tone left no room for argument, and Amy nodded, grateful for his presence. They ventured into the storm, the wind tearing at their clothes, sand stinging their faces. The ruins loomed ahead, their jagged outlines barely visible through the haze. The moaning came again, louder now, and Amy's heart pounded as they neared the hidden chamber. Poirot held up a hand, signaling her to stop, and pointed to a faint glow flickering within the pit. Amy squinted, her lantern swaying in the wind. "Someone's there," she whispered, her voice nearly lost in the storm's roar. Poirot nodded, his expression grim, and they crept closer, keeping low. The glow came from a small fire, its flames licking at a pile of Papersfield notes. Amy realized, recognizing the team's meticulous handwriting, before they could act. A figure darted from the shadows, cloaked in a dark shawl. Amy lunged forward, but the figure vanished into the storm, leaving only the crackle of burning papers. Poirot knelt by the fire, salvaging what he could. "These are Miss Johnson's notes," he said, his voice sharp. "Someone wishes to destroy evidence." Amy's mind raced. "But who, and why now?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Because we are close, mademoiselle. The killer feels the net tightening." They returned to the tent, soaked and shaken, the charred fragments of notes clutched in Poirot's hands. The team was waiting, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion. Dr. Leidner stood abruptly, his voice hoarse. "This has to stop. We're all in danger." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "But the danger is not from the desert or its ghosts. It is from one among us." He held up the singed papers, his gaze sweeping the room. "Someone burned these to hide the truth, but the truth, it has a way of rising from the dust." Amy watched the team's reaction, Skir's clenched jaw, Miss Johnson's pale face, Sheila's sharp intake of breath. The storm raged outside, but inside, a different kind of storm was brewing. Poirot turned to Amy, his voice low. "The diary, mademoiselle read it tonight. There is a clue we have missed." That night, as the storm battered the camp, Amy sat by her lantern, Louise's diary open before her. The pages were a tangle of fear and guilt, recounting her life with Bosna, her betrayal, and her belief that he had somehow returned. One entry stood out, written in a trembling hand. "The hidden truth is in the chamber. He knows what I did, and the stones will tell." Amy's breath caught. The hidden chamber, the same place where the cursed tablets and the new Akkadian slab had been found. Was Louise pointing to a literal truth buried in the ruins, or was it a metaphor for her own secrets? Amy marked the page, her resolve hardening. Tomorrow, she would join Poirot in the chamber. Whatever dangers awaited, sleep eluded her, the storm's wail mingling with the memory of the moan from the ruins. She clutched the carved stone she'd found under her pillow days ago, its strange symbols cold against her skin. The camp was a maze of lies, and Amy felt herself at its center, determined to help Poirot unravel it. Louise's death was no curse, but a calculated act, and the killer was still among them, watching, waiting. As dawn broke, the storm subsided, leaving a heavy stillness. Amy met Poirot at the chamber's entrance, the air cool and sharp with the scent of damp earth. "The diary," she said, handing it to him. "Louise wrote about the chamber. She thought the truth was hidden there." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Then we shall find it, mademoiselle. The dust may hide secrets, but it cannot keep them forever." They descended into the chamber, its walls lined with ancient stone, the air thick with the weight of centuries. The new tablet lay on a makeshift table, its symbols glinting faintly in the lantern's glow. Poirot traced them with a finger, his brow furrowed. "This is no curse," he said at last. "It is a map, a guide to something hidden deeper within." Amy's pulse quickened. "You mean there's another chamber?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, "or perhaps it points to the killer's motive. We must dig deeper literally and figuratively." The day unfolded with a renewed sense of purpose. Amy assisted Poirot as he interrogated the team, his questions sharp and precise, cutting through their defenses. Carey admitted to a brief affair with Louise, his voice thick with regret. Miss Johnson confessed to jealousy, her stern facade cracking as she spoke of Louise's charm. Dr. Leidner remained distant, his answers vague, his eyes haunted by afternoon. Poirot and Amy returned to the chamber, joined by a reluctant Carey, who carried tools to probe the walls. As they worked, Amy noticed Sheila lingering nearby, her expression unreadable. "She's been watching us," Amy whispered to Poirot. "Do you think she's involved?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Everyone is involved, mademoiselle, until proven otherwise. But Mademoiselle Riley, she sees more than she says. We shall keep an eye on her." Hours passed, the chamber yielding nothing but dust and echoes. Amy's arms ached from lifting stones, but her determination held. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Carey's pick struck something solid. A hollow thud reverberated through the chamber. They cleared away debris, revealing a sealed stone slab, its surface etched with the same jagged symbols as the tablet. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The hidden truth," he said softly. "It begins to emerge." They pried open the slab, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. Amy's heart pounded as she followed Poirot, the air growing colder with each step. At the passage's end, they found a small alcove, its walls lined with clay jars. One was cracked, its contents spilling onto the floor. Gold beads, a dagger, and a single cuneiform tablet. Smaller than the others, Poirot lifted the tablet, his fingers steady. "This," he said, "is no curse. It is a record, a confession perhaps, or a contract." He read the symbols aloud, his voice echoing in the confined space. "It speaks of betrayal, of a promise broken, and a price to be paid." Amy's mind raced. "Louise's betrayal, Bosna perhaps," Poirot said, "or perhaps it is older, a story the killer has woven into their own. We must return to the surface and confront the team." "The truth is close, mademoiselle." As they emerged, the camp was quiet. The team gathered for dinner. Poirot held the tablet aloft, his voice carrying over the murmurs. "This," he declared, "is the key to Madame Leidner's death. One of you knows its meaning, and I, Hercule Poirot, will find you." Amy watched the faces around her. Carey's shock, Miss Johnson's fear, Dr. Leidner's sudden stillness. The storm had passed, but the air crackled with tension. The diary, the tablet, the burned notes, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Amy felt the weight of each one. She glanced at Poirot, his calm assurance a lifeline in the chaos. They were close, so close, to unmasking the killer. And Amy, for all her fear, was ready to see it through. The night stretched on, the camp restless under the desert stars. Amy lay awake, the diary's words circling in her mind. The hidden truth was out there, in the dust, in the shadows, and with Poirot by her side, she would find it. Chapter 6. The Second Strike. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the Hassani dig site, its rays turning the sand into a shimmering sea of gold that seemed to mock the turmoil brewing among the camp's inhabitants. Nurse Amy Letheran wiped sweat from her brow as she stepped out of her tent, her nurse's uniform clinging uncomfortably to her skin. The air was thick with the aftermath of Louise Leidner's murder, the weight of grief and suspicion pressing on everyone. Amy's heart still ached with the sting of failure. She had promised to protect Louise, yet the woman lay dead, clutching a Sumerian amulet in a locked room, her death shrouded in whispers of an ancient curse. Now, as the camp buzzed with unease, Amy felt a flicker of resolve to uncover the truth, fueled by Hercule Poirot's arrival and his sharp, methodical presence. The morning after Louise's murder, the dig site felt like a pressure cooker. The team gathered near the main excavation trench, their faces drawn and eyes darting suspiciously at one another. Dr. Eric Leidner, his usual scholarly composure frayed, stood at the edge of the trench, staring into the depths as if the ancient ruins might offer answers. Richard Carey, the charming assistant with a reputation for flirtation, leaned against a tent pole, his easy smile replaced by a taut jaw. Miss Anne Johnson, the stern epigraphist, clutched her notebook tightly, her lips pressed into a thin line. Sheila Riley, the young daughter of a local archaeologist, hovered nearby, her sharp eyes scanning the group as if cataloging their every move. The workers, local men hired for manual labor, whispered among themselves in Arabic, their voices low and wary. Emmy sensed the fragility of the group. A single spark could ignite chaos. Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the heat in a linen suit and polished shoes, stood at the center of the gathering, his small frame radiating authority. His mustache twitched as he surveyed the team, his green eyes gleaming with the intensity of a predator sizing up its prey. "Mies Amos," he began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We are faced with a crime most heinous, but rest assured, the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot are already at work. The death of Madame Leidner is no act of a vengeful spirit, but the work of a human hand, one among us, perhaps." A ripple of unease passed through the group. Amy, standing near the back, felt a chill despite the heat. She glanced at Dr. Leidner, whose hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. Was it grief or something else? Poirot's words lingered. In her mind, a human hand. The idea of a killer among them was both terrifying and galvanizing. She resolved to stay close to Poirot, to observe and assist, determined to redeem her failure to save Louise. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Poirot beckoned Amy to join him near the main tent, where a table was cluttered with maps, artifacts, and Louise's personal effects. "Mademoiselle Letherin," he said, his tone warm but probing, "you were close to Madame Leidner. Your observations are of great value. Tell me, what did you notice about her in the days before her death?" Amy hesitated, her mind racing through the past week. "She was terrified, Monsieur Poirot," she said at last. She spoke of visions, a spectral figure, a face at her window. She thought it was her first husband, Frederick Bosner, back to haunt her in those tablets. She was convinced they were tied to a curse, that the dig had angered some ancient force. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A curse, you say? Bah, the human mind is skilled at weaving stories to mask its fears. But these tablets tell me more." Amy recounted how Dr. Leitner had shown her the relics from the hidden chamber, their surfaces etched with cuneiform warnings of vengeance. She described the threatening letter Louise had received, written in what looked like ancient script, and how she had locked it away in her trunk for safekeeping. Poirot listened intently, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Very good, mademoiselle. You have the makings of a fine observer. Now, let us examine this letter." They retrieved the letter from Amy's trunk, a single sheet of rough paper, inscribed with angular symbols that mimicked the cuneiform on the tablets. Poirot studied it under a magnifying glass, his brow furrowing. "Curio," he murmured. "The script is precise, yet it lacks the authenticity of true Sumerian. A clever imitation, perhaps, designed to frighten. But by whom?" Before Amy could respond, a piercing scream shattered the morning's stillness. The sound came from the direction of the hidden chamber, where the cursed tablets had been found. Amy and Poirot hurried toward the source, their boots crunching on the sand. They arrived to find the team gathered around a crumpled figure at the chamber's entrance. It was Miss Johnson, her face contorted in agony, her hands clutching her throat. A faint chemical smell hung in the air, sharp and acrid. "She's dead," Sheila Riley cried, her voice trembling as she backed away. Dr. Leidner knelt beside Miss Johnson, his face pale. "It's poison," he said hoarsely. "Hydrochloric acid." By the smell of it, Amy's stomach churned. 2 deaths in as many days. First Louise, now Miss Johnson. The camp felt like a trap closing around them. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands carefully examining the scene. He noted a small vial near Miss Johnson's hand, its contents spilled onto the sand. "This is no accident," he said grimly. "The poison was administered deliberately. We have a killer who strikes with precision." The team was ushered away as Poirot and Amy secured the scene. Amy's mind raced, replaying a conversation she'd overheard the previous day between Miss Johnson and Carey. They had argued fiercely about the tablets. Miss Johnson had insisted on cataloging them immediately, while Carey had pushed to move them to a safer location, claiming the chamber was unstable. Could their disagreement have led to this? Amy shared her memory with Poirot, who nodded thoughtfully. "A most interesting observation, mademoiselle. Conflict over the relics may indeed be at the heart of this mystery." Poirot instructed the workers to guard the chamber while he and Amy returned to the main tent to analyze the evidence. He examined the vial, confirming it contained hydrochloric acid, a chemical used in the dig's laboratory for cleaning artifacts. "The poison was taken from the lab," he said. "This narrows our suspects to those with access: Dr. Leidner, Mr. Carey, Miss Riley, and a few others. But motive, that is the key." Amy's thoughts drifted to the tablets. Could the killer be targeting anyone who handles them? She asked. Louise was obsessed with them, and now Miss Johnson, who was studying them. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A pattern, perhaps, or a clever misdirection. "We must investigate the laboratory and the tablets themselves. Come, mademoiselle, let us see what secrets they hold. The laboratory was a small, cluttered space filled with shelves of chemicals, tools, and artifacts. Amy helped Poirot search for clues, her nurse's training making her meticulous in noting details. They found the hydrochloric acid bottle, its cap slightly askew, as if hastily replaced. Nearby, a notebook belonging to Miss Johnson lay open, filled with sketches of the cursed tablets and notes on their inscriptions. One entry caught Amy's eye. Carrie insists on moving tablets. Why the rush? Suspect tampering, Poirot read the note over her shoulder. Tampering, you say? This suggests Miss Johnson suspected foul play. Perhaps she knew too much. As they worked, the camp grew increasingly tense. The workers refused to enter the chamber, whispering about the curse's wrath. Sheila Riley, usually brash, seemed shaken, avoiding eye contact with Amy. Dr. Leidner retreated to his tent, claiming a headache while Carrie paced nervously near the trench. Amy felt the weight of their collective fear, but Poirot remained, unfazed, his mind a steel trap closing around the truth. That afternoon, Poirot gathered the team to announce his findings. The poison that killed Mademoiselle Johnson came from this very laboratory, he said, holding up the vial. Someone among us used it to silence her just as they silenced Madame Leitner. But fear not, the truth cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. The announcement sparked panic. Carrie accused Sheila of sneaking into the lab, while she retorted that he was deflecting blame. Dr. Leidner remained silent, his eyes fixed on the ground. Amy watched them all, her instincts as a nurse picking up on their body language, where Carrie's hands clenched, the way Sheila's voice wavered. She whispered her observations to Poirot, who nodded approvingly. You see much, mademoiselle. Keep watching. As night fell, the camp settled into an uneasy quiet. Amy couldn't sleep, her mind replaying Miss Johnson's final moments. She stepped outside her tent, the desert air cool against her skin, and gazed at the ruins silhouetted against the starry sky. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint rustle of sand. Then, she heard it, a low guttural sound like a chant, coming from the direction of the chamber. Heart pounding. Amy crept toward the sound, her flashlight casting shaky beams across the sand. She reached the chamber's entrance and peered inside, her breath catching as she saw a figure crouched in the shadows, muttering words she couldn't understand. The figure turned, and Amy stifled a gasp. It was Sheila Riley, her face pale, in the moonlight, her hands clutching one of the cursed tablets. What are you doing? Amy whispered, her voice trembling. Sheila's eyes widened, and she dropped the tablet, which clattered against the stone floor. I was just checking it, she stammered. I thought, maybe there's something we missed. Amy didn't believe her. The fear in Sheila's eyes was too raw, too guilty. She backed away, promising to keep quiet for now, but her mind raced with suspicion. Had Sheila been tampering with the tablets, as Miss Johnson suspected? Or was she another victim of the curse's grip on the camp's imagination? The next morning, Amy reported the incident to Poirot, who listened with keen interest. Mademoiselle Riley is a curious one, he said. Her action suggests she knows more than she admits. We must keep her close and the tablets closer. Poirot organized a thorough examination of the chamber, with Amy and a few trusted workers assisting. They catalogued the tablets, noting their inscriptions and comparing them to Miss Johnson's sketches. One tablet stood out, a smaller, rougher one with fresher carvings, as if recently made. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he examined it. This is no ancient relic, he said. It is a forgery, designed to fuel the cursed narrative. The killer is clever, but not cleverer than Poirot. Amy felt a surge of hope. The forged tablet was a tangible clue, proof that the murders were the work of a calculated mind, not a supernatural force. She vowed to protect the remaining team members, her nurse's instinct driving her to act as their guardian. Poirot, sensing her determination, placed a hand on her shoulder. You have courage, mademoiselle. Together, we will unmask this killer. As the day wore on, the camp's paranoia grew. The workers refused to touch the tablets, and even Carrie seemed reluctant to enter the chamber. Dr. Leidner emerged from his tent, his face haggard, and insisted on resuming work, claiming it would honor Louise and Miss Johnson. But Amy noticed his hand shaking as he handled the relics, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. That evening, as Amy and Poirot reviewed their findings, a sudden commotion erupted. A worker ran into the tent, shouting that the chamber that had collapsed, trapping 2 men inside. Amy and Poirot rushed to the scene, where dust and debris clouded the air. Carrie and Sheila were already there, organizing a rescue effort. Amy joined in, her heart pounding as they dug through the rubble. After a tense hour, they freed the men, shaken but unharmed. Poirot surveyed the collapsed chamber, his expression grim. This was no accident, he said. The supports were weakened deliberately. The killer seeks to destroy evidence or to eliminate more of us. Amy's resolve hardened. The second strike had failed to claim more lives, but the killer was still among them, hiding behind the curse's shadow. She looked at Poirot, his calm determination a beacon in the chaos. We're close, aren't we? She asked. Poirot nodded, his mustache curling slightly. Oui, mademoiselle, the truth is near. We must be vigilant, for the killer will strike again if we do not act swiftly. As the stars rose over the desert, Amy stood guard outside the main tent, her flashlight sweeping the shadows. The camp was a powder keg, and she knew the next explosion could come at any moment. But with Poirot's guidance and her own growing confidence, she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, determined to see justice done for Louise and Miss Johnson. The curse might be a lie, but the danger was all too real. Chapter 7. The curse unraveled. The sun hung low over the desolate expanse of Whodunit, its dying rays casting long jagged shadows across the archaeological dig. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and ancient stone, stirred by a restless breeze that seemed to carry whispers of the past. Nurse Amy Leverin stood at the edge of the camp, her boots sinking slightly into the soft sand, her eyes fixed on the crumbling ruins that loomed like silent sentinels in the distance. The events of the past days, Louise Leidner's murder, Miss Johnson's poisoning, and the ever-present specter of the so-called Sumerian curse had left her nerves frayed, her mind a tangle of suspicion and dread. Yet there was a spark of determination in her, kindled by Hercule Poirot's calm assurance that the truth was within reach. Poirot, his small, fastidious figure, a stark contrast to the rugged desert, stood beside her, his eyes narrowed as he surveyed the dig site. His moustache twitched slightly, a sign Amy had come to recognize as a prelude to some profound observation. "Mademoiselle," he said, his voice low but clear, "the answers we seek lie not in the whispers of the desert, but in the hearts of those who walk upon it. Today, we shall descend into the shadows, both literal and figurative, to uncover the truth." Amy nodded, her throat tight. The hidden chamber where the cursed tablets had been unearthed was their destination. It was a place that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, as if the stones themselves resented their disturbance. The team had avoided it since Miss Johnson's death, but Poirot insisted it held the key to unraveling the mystery. "Let's get on with it then," Amy said, squaring her shoulders. "I want to know who's behind this curse or no curse." The descent into the chamber was treacherous, the narrow stone steps slick with dust and time. Amy carried a lantern, its flickering light casting grotesque shapes on the walls, where faint carvings of Sumerian deities stared down with unseeing eyes. Poirot, despite his polished demeanor, navigated the uneven path with surprising agility, his cane tapping lightly against the stone. Behind them followed Richard Carey, his handsome face drawn with unease, and Sheila Riley, the local archaeologist's daughter whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Dr. Leidner had declined to join, citing a headache, though Amy noted the tremor in his hands as he'd waved them off. The chamber itself was a cavernous space, its air cool and stale, thick with the scent of earth and antiquity. The walls were lined with shelves of clay tablets, their surfaces etched with cuneiform script that seemed to writhe in the lantern's glow. At the center stood a stone altar, its surface stained with what Amy hoped was merely age, not blood. The tablets that had sparked the curse rumors lay in a neat pile, their warnings of divine vengeance now seeming less like superstition and more like a deliberate taunt. Poirot knelt beside the tablets, his gloved fingers tracing the inscriptions. "These are remarkable," he murmured, almost to himself. "But they are not all they seem," observed Mademoiselle. "The precision of these carvings, they are too clean, too modern in their execution. A true Sumerian scribe would leave imperfections of their tools, their haste. These are the work of a careful hand, one that seeks to deceive." Amy frowned, leaning closer. "You're saying they're fakes. But who would go to all this trouble, and why?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "To create fear, mademoiselle, to weave a narrative so compelling that it obscures the truth. The curse is a mask, and behind it lies a human motive, greed, perhaps, or vengeance. We must look to the hearts of those around us." As they examined the tablets, Sheila Riley's voice cut through the silence. "Careful with those," she said sharply. "They're worth a fortune, curse or no curse. My father says the black market for Sumerian artifacts is booming." Her tone was casual, but Amy caught a flicker of something calculation, perhaps in her eyes. Carey, standing near the altar, shifted uncomfortably. "Nobody's selling anything," he said, his voice tight. "We're here to preserve history, not profit from it." Poirot's gaze flicked between them, his expression unreadable. "And yet," he said softly, "the temptation of such treasures is great. Tell me, Monsieur Carey, have you ever considered what one might do with the wealth these relics could bring?" Carey's jaw tightened. "I'm not a thief, Poirot. I loved Louise, and I'd never dishonor her memory by loved." Poirot interrupted, his voice sharp. "An interesting choice of word, Monsieur. Love can drive a man to many things: passion, sacrifice, or betrayal." The air grew taut, and Amy felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's dampness. She glanced at Sheila, who was watching Carey with a faint smirk, as if she knew something he didn't. Before Amy could press further, a low rumble echoed through the chamber, followed by a cascade of dust and stone. The ground shook, and a section of the wall near the entrance collapsed, blocking their path. "Get back," Carey shouted, pulling Amy away from the falling debris. The lantern flickered, casting wild shadows as the four of them scrambled to the far side of the chamber. The air was thick with dust, and Amy coughed, her heart pounding. "What was that?" she gasped. Poirot, remarkably calm, brushed dust from his coat. A trap, mademoiselle, or, more precisely, an attempt to trap us. This was no accident. He pointed to the collapsed wall, where a rope dangled, its end frayed as if cut. Someone wished to ensure we did not leave this place too soon. Sheila's eyes widened. You're saying someone tried to kill us? Not kill, perhaps, Poirot said, but delay. To keep us from the truth. And yet, in their haste, they have revealed themselves. Only one who knows this chamber well could have rigged such a device. Amy's mind raced. Dr. Lydna hadn't, when joined them, but he knew the chamber's layout better than anyone. Could he have orchestrated this? Or was it Carrie, whose temper had flared under Poirot's questioning? Or Sheila, with her talk of black markets? The possibilities swirled, each more unsettling than the last. They worked quickly to clear the debris, Kara's strength and Sheila's knowledge of the ruins proving invaluable. After an hour of grueling effort they broke through, emerging into the blinding sunlight. Amy's legs trembled as she gulped fresh air, but Poirot was already moving, his eyes scanning the camp for signs of disturbance. We must act swiftly, he said. The one who set this trap will not expect us to have escaped so soon. Back at the camp, the atmosphere was tense. Dr. Lydna greeted them with feigned relief. But Amy noticed his hands were still shaking. The other team members, Father Lavigny, the linguist, and Bill Coleman, the young surveyor, milled about, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. Poirot wasted no time, gathering everyone in the main tent for an impromptu meeting. We have been played, Ms. Amos, he declared, his voice commanding attention. The curse is a fabrication, a clever ruse to mask a killer's intent. But the killer has made a mistake today, and we are closer to unmasking them. Amy watched the team closely, noting their reactions. Father Lavigny's calm demeanor seemed forced, his fingers twitching as he clutched his rosary. Coleman fidgeted, avoiding eye contact. Dr. Lydna's gaze darted to the ruins, as if expecting something to emerge from them. Only Poirot seemed at ease, his mind a steel trap closing around the truth. As the meeting adjourned, Amy pulled Poirot aside. That cave-in, she whispered. It wasn't just to scare us, was it? Someone wanted those tablets buried Doris with them. Poirot nodded. Precisely, mademoiselle, the tablets are the key, not for their curse, but for what they represent. Someone wishes to control their fate, whether to hide them, sell them, or use them as a weapon. We must find the link between the tablets and our victims. That night, Amy couldn't sleep. The desert was quiet, too quiet, and the memory of the chamber's collapse haunted her. She slipped out of her tent, lantern in hand, and made her way to the storage tent where the tablets were kept. If Poirot was right, there might be a clue among them, something the killer didn't want seen. The tent was dark, the air heavy with the scent of clay and canvas. She moved carefully, her lantern illuminating the shelves of artifacts. As she reached for one of the tablets, a shadow moved behind her. She spun around, heart in her throat, to find Sheila Riley standing in the entrance, her expression unreadable. "What are you doing here, Nurse Letherin?" Sheila asked, her voice low. "I could ask you the same," Amy replied, gripping the lantern tighter. "You seem awfully interested in these tablets." Sheila stepped closer, her eyes glinting. "In the lantern's light, I told you, they're valuable, more than you realize. My father's been approached by buyers-rich men who'd kill for a piece like this." Amy's pulse quickened. "Kill like Louise and Miss Johnson." Sheila's face hardened. "Don't be absurd. I'm no murderer, but I know a good deal when I see one. Kara's been talking about moving these tablets, you know. He and Louise were planning something before she died." The accusation hung in the air, but before Amy could respond, a sharp crack echoed outside the tent. She rushed out, Sheila, close behind, to find a pile of crates toppled over, their contents minor artifacts scattered across the sand. In the moonlight, Amy caught a glimpse of a figure retreating into the ruins. "Stop," she shouted, but the figure was gone. Sheila cursed under her breath. "That's the second time tonight someone's tried to sabotage us. First the cave-in, now this." Amy's mind raced. The figure had been too quick to identify, but the timing was suspicious. Was it Carrie, trying to cover his tracks? Or someone else, desperate to keep the tablet's secrets buried? She returned to her tent, her thoughts the whirlwind, and wrote down everything she'd seen, determined to share it with Poirot at dawn. The next morning, Poirot listened intently as Amy recounted the night's events. His eyes sparkled with interest. "You have done well, mademoiselle. The pieces are falling into place. The cave-in, the toppled crates, the forged tablets all point to a single truth. The killer is among us, and they are growing desperate." He led her back to the chamber, this time alone, to avoid further sabotage. There, among the dust and shadows, Poirot examined the altar more closely. Hidden beneath a loose stone, he found a small sealed box, its surface etched with the same symbols Amy had found under her pillow on her first night. Inside were fragments of modern paper, stained to look ancient, and a vial of what Poirot identified as the same hydrochloric acid that had killed Miss Johnson. "The killer's tools," Poirot said, his voice grim. "They crafted the curse, mademoiselle, to terrify and distract, but they could not foresee the tenacity of Nurse Amy Letherin. nor the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot. Amy felt a surge of pride, tempered by fear. "Who is it, Monsieur Poirot?" "Carrie Sheila." "Dr. Leidner." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, mademoiselle. The truth is near, but we must tread carefully. The killer knows we are close, and a cornered beast is most dangerous." As they left the chamber, the desert seemed to hold its breath, the ruins watching in silent judgment. Amy knew the final confrontation was coming, and though fear gnawed at her, she felt a resolve. She hadn't known she possessed. The curse was no supernatural force, it was a human heart, twisted by greed or vengeance. And she would help Poirot bring it to light. The day passed in a blur of activity, with Poirot quietly observing the team, his questions sharp and probing. Amy watched for signs of guilt, her nurse's eye catching the smallest tells. Dr. Leidner's pallor, Carrie's clenched fists, Sheila's too casual demeanor. By evening, Poirot announced another meeting, this time promising revelations. The team gathered in the main tent, the air thick with anticipation and dread. "Monsieur et Madame Poirot," began, his voice steady. "The curse of Hassani is no ancient spirit, but a modern deception. The tablets, the threats, the death soul are the work of one among you, driven by a motive as old as time, betrayal." He paced slowly, his eyes scanning each face. Louise Leidner was not killed by a ghost, but by someone who knew her past, her fears, her secrets. Miss Johnson died because she saw too much, suspected too much. And today, an attempt was made to bury the truth literally in the chamber. Amy's heart pounded as Poirot's gaze settled on Dr. Leidner. "You, monsieur, have much to explain. Your knowledge of the chamber, your absence during the cave-in, your trembling hands tell me. Why do you fear the truth?" Dr. Leidner's face crumpled, but before he could speak, a shout rang out from outside. The team rushed to the entrance to find a fire blazing near the storage tent, its flames licking at the crates of artifacts. Amy's instincts kicked in, and she grabbed a blanket, beating back the flames alongside Carrie and Coleman. Sheila stood frozen, her face pale, while Poirot watched, his expression unreadable as the fire died down. Amy spotted something among the ashes, a tablet, its surface scorched but intact, its carvings unmistakably modern. "Another fake," she whispered, handing it to Poirot. He nodded, his eyes gleaming. "The final piece, mademoiselle. The killer's desperation has betrayed them. Tomorrow, we shall unmask them, and the curse of Hassani will be no more." Amy lay awake that night, the weight of the day pressing on her. The desert was silent, but she felt the truth closing in, a storm gathering on the horizon. She trusted Poirot's brilliance, but the human cost of the case, Louise's fear, Miss Johnson's death, the team's fractured trust weighed heavily. Yet, as she drifted into uneasy sleep, she felt a flicker of hope. The curse was unraveling, and with it, the killer's mask would fall. The next morning, Poirot was a whirlwind of activity, directing Amy to gather specific artifacts and documents. He seemed to vibrate with purpose, his little grey cells working at full speed. By noon, he called the team together once more, this time in the shadow of the ruins, where the air seemed to hum with anticipation. "The time has come," Poirot said, his voice carrying over the wind. "The curse is a lie, but the truth is far more deadly. Let us end this masquerade." As he spoke, Amy's eyes darted to each face, searching for the betrayer. The desert watched, silent and eternal, as the final act of the drama began to unfold. Chapter 8. The gathering storm. The sun hung low over the Hassani dig site, casting long shadows across the sand that seemed to writhe like restless spirits. The air was thick with the scent of dust and tension, the kind that clung to the skin and burrowed into the mind. Nurse Amy Leatherin stood at the edge of the camp, her eyes scanning the horizon where the desert met the sky in a haze of gold and crimson. The events of the past days, Louise's murder, Miss Johnson's poisoning, the cryptic tablets, and the ever-present whispers of an ancient Sumerian curse had woven a net of unease around the team. Now, with Hercule Poirot's investigation tightening like a noose, Amy felt the weight of the truth pressing closer, though its shape remained maddeningly elusive. She adjusted her scarf against the evening chill, her thoughts racing. The fire last night, which had nearly consumed the precious relics, still lingered in her mind. She could still hear the crackle of flames, the shouts of the team as they scrambled to save the artifacts, and Poirot's calm, commanding voice cutting through the chaos. They had salvaged most of the relics, but the discovery of a forged tablet among the ashes had shifted the ground beneath her. Someone was orchestrating this nightmare, weaving a tapestry of fear and deception under the guise of a curse. Amy's hands clenched at her sides, her resolve hardening. She had promised to protect the team, to honor Louise's memory, and she would not falter now. Poirot, impeccable in his pressed suit despite the desert's dust, approached her from the main tent. His mustache twitched slightly, a sign Amy had come to recognize as the prelude to one of his revelations. "Mademoiselle Leatherin," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of certainty. "Tonight we shall gather the threads of this mystery, the storm. It is coming not of sand, but of truth. You will join me?" "Yes," Amy nodded, her throat tight. "Of course, M. Poirot. I want to see this through." "Bon," he replied, his eyes gleaming with that peculiar intensity that made her feel as though he saw not just her, but the very workings of her soul. Then let us prepare. The stage is set, and the players, they must take their places. The main tent was a cavern of flickering lantern light by the time the team assembled. The air inside was stifling, heavy with the mingled sense of sweat, canvas, and the faint metallic tang of fear. Amy stood near the entrance, her nurse's instincts keeping her alert to the team's every movement, every glance. Dr. Eric Leidner sat at the head of the table, his face pale and drawn, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the wood. Carrie, the charming assistant with eyes that held too many secrets, leaned back in his chair, his posture casual but his jaw tight. Sheila Riley, the fiery daughter of a local archaeologist, sat with her arms crossed, her gaze darting between the others as if expecting an attack. The remaining team members, Dr. Byron, the quiet botanist, Father Lavigny, the monkish and Coleman, the young surveyor, filled the space with a palpable unease, their voices hushed as they awaited Poirot's words. Poirot stood at the center of the tent, his small frame commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. He clasped his hands behind his back, his eyes sweeping over the group like a hawk surveying its prey. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate, "we stand at the precipice of truth. 2 women, Madame Leitner and Mademoiselle Johnson, have been taken from us. Their lives extinguished not by the hand of an ancient curse, but by a human one, cunning and deliberate. Tonight, I shall lay bare the threads of this deception, and we shall see who among us weaves the web." A murmur rippled through the group, but Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "First, let us consider the facts. Madame Leitner, she was found dead in her locked room, a Sumerian amulet in her hand, a single drop of blood upon the floor. Mademoiselle Johnson poisoned by hydrochloric acid near the chamber of the cursed tablets, and last night, a fire, set with intent to destroy evidence, yet revealing a forged tablet, a tablet that speaks not of ancient gods, but of modern treachery." Dr. Leidner's fingers stopped their drumming. "M. Poirot," he said, his voice strained, "you cannot seriously believe one of us would stoop to such acts." The curse, Poirot interrupted, his tone sharp. "Nan, monsieur, there is no curse but that of human greed and vengeance. The tablets, the amulet, the threatening letters, all are tools, crafted to so fear and obscure the truth. But Hercule Poirot, he does not fear shadows, he seeks the light." Amy watched the team closely, her heart pounding. Dr. Leidner's sudden stillness caressed tightened jaw. Sheila's narrowed eyes, each reaction was a piece of the puzzle, but none yet formed a clear picture. She glanced at Poirot, who continued, undeterred. "Let us speak of Madame Leidner's past," Poirot said, his voice softening but no less commanding. She spoke of a ghostly face at her window, resembling her late husband, Frederick Bosner, a man she believed dead, a man she betrayed. This vision, it haunted her, fed her fear of the curse. But what if this face was not a ghost, but a man of flesh and blood, living among us, wearing a mask of deceit? A gasp escaped Sheila, quickly stifled. Dr. Leidner's face drained of what little color remained, and Kara's hand twitched toward his pocket before stilling. Amy's pulse quickened. Poirot was baiting them, she realized, casting lines to see who would bite the letters. Poirot continued, written in an ancient script, yet delivered with modern precision. The amulet, placed in Madame Leidner's hand after her death, as if to seal the curse's narrative, and the forged tablet, burned yet preserved, a clumsy attempt to misdirect. These are not the acts of a deity, but of a mind calculating and cruel, a mind that knows the dig, the relics, and the fears of those within this camp. Father Lavigny, his voice calm but edged with unease, spoke up. "M. Poirot, you suggest one of us is this mastermind, but who and why?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Why indeed? Let us consider motive. Madame Leidner, she was loved by some, envied by others. Her beauty, her charm, they stirred passions. Monsieur Carey, you were close to her, were you not? Too close, perhaps." Carey's face flushed. "That's absurd. I cared for Louise, yes, but I would never silence," Monsieur Poirot said, his voice like a whip. "Your heart, it speaks louder than your words. And Mademoiselle Johnson, she knew of your closeness, did she not? Her jealousy, her arguments with you over the tablets, perhaps she saw too much." Amy's mind raced, recalling Miss Johnson's sharp words to Carey about moving the relics. Had she suspected something more than an affair? She glanced at Dr. Leidner, whose eyes were fixed on Poirot, his hands now gripping the table's edge. "And you, Dr. Leidner," Poirot said, turning to him. "Your devotion to your wife was profound, yet your obsession with these relics, it consumed you. Did you fear her past would unravel your work, or did you know more of this curse than you let on?" Leidner's voice was a hoarse whisper. "You're wrong, Poirot. I loved Louise. I would never harm her." Poirot's mustache twitched again, and Amy sensed he was closing in. "Then, let us speak of the fire," he said. "A blaze that threatened to destroy the relics, yet spared the forged tablet an accident. Nan, a deliberate act, meant to erase evidence or to plant it. Who among you had access to the storage tent? Who knew the relic's value, both to science and to the black market?" Sheila Riley leaned forward, her voice sharp. "You're accusing us of theft now. Those relics are priceless, yes, but we're here to study them, not sell them." Poirot's gaze locked onto her. "And yet, Mademoiselle Riley, you have spoken with Monsieur Carey of markets, of buyers who care not for history but for profit. I have heard of such whispers." Sheila's eyes widened, and Amy's breath caught. She remembered overhearing Sheila and Carey near the ruins, their voices low and urgent, discussing opportunities and discretion. Had they been planning to sell the relics, or was this another of Poirot's traps? The tent fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words pressing down on them all. Amy's hands were clammy, her mind spinning with possibilities. She wanted to speak, to ask Poirot to clarify, but his presence demanded silence, his authority holding the room in a vice. Suddenly a shout came from outside, shattering the tension. "Fire! The storage tent's on fire again." The team leapt to their feet, chairs scraping against the ground. Amy's heart lurched as she followed the others out into the night, the glow of flames already licking the sky. The storage tent, where the remaining relics were kept, was ablaze, the canvas curling and blackening as the fire roared. Coleman and Dr. Byron grabbed buckets of sand, hurling them at the flames, while Sheila screamed orders to fetch water from the camp's meat supply. Amy joined the effort, her nurse's training kicking in as she organized the chaos, directing the team to form a chain. Poirot, unruffled, stood at a distance, his eyes not on the fire but on the team, watching their every move. Amy caught his glance and understood he was observing, analyzing, using the crisis to reveal the truth. She worked faster, her hands gritty with sand, her eyes stinging from smoke, determined to save what she could. The fire was fierce but brief, doused by the team's frantic efforts before it could consume everything. As the last flames died, Amy knelt by the tent's ruins, coughing, her hands sifting through the ashes. Her fingers brushed something hard, clay fragment, its surface etched with familiar cuneiform. She held it up, her heart sinking. Another tablet, its edges scorched but its message intact. She handed it to Poirot, who examined it with a frown. "This," he said softly, "is no accident. This tablet, it is another forgery, place to be found. The killer grows bold, or perhaps desperate." Amy's stomach twisted. Poirot, who's doing this? He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Patience, mademoiselle. The storm it gathers, but it will break soon. Return to the tent. We are not finished." Back in the main tent, the team was shaken, their faces smudged with soot and fear. Dr. Leidner's hands trembled as he sat, and Kara's eyes darted to the exits, as if planning an escape. Sheila's defiance had softened, her shoulders slumped, while Father Lavigny muttered prayers under his breath. Poirot resumed his place at the center, the charred tablet in his hand. "This fire," he said, "was no act of chance. It was meant to destroy, or to distract, but it has done neither. This tablet, like the one before, is a lie, a creation of the killer to perpetuate the myth of the curse. But Hercule Poirot, he sees through lies, and he sees you." His eyes swept the room again, lingering on Dr. Leidner. "You have spoken of your love for your wife, yet you have not spoken of her past. You knew of Frederick Bosner, did you not? You knew he was no ghost, but a man who could return to haunt her." Leidner's face crumpled, his voice breaking. I suspected. She told me of him, of her fears. But I thought it was over, that he was dead." Poirot's voice was relentless. "And yet, you did not tell me. You did not tell Mademoiselle Letherin, who cared for your wife. You kept silent, as the letters arrived, as the amulet was placed, as the tablets appeared. Why, monsieur? What do you hide?" Leidner buried his face in his hands, and Amy felt a pang of pity, quickly tempered by suspicion. Was he grieving, or was he acting? She looked to Poirot, who gave her a slight nod, as if to say, "Watch closely, Mademoiselle Riley." Poirot continued, turning to Sheila. "You have knowledge of the relic's value, knowledge that extends beyond this camp. Tell me, what plans did you make with Monsieur Carey? What opportunities did you discuss?" Sheila's face paled, but her voice was steady. "You're twisting things, Poirot. We talked about preserving the relics, not selling them. This dig is my father's legacy. I'd never betray it." Poirot's smile was thin. "And yet, betrayal is the heart of this matter. The betrayal of trust, of love, of truth. Someone here has betrayed us all." The tent was a powder keg, every word from Poirot a spark. Amy's mind raced, piecing together the clues, the letters, the amulet, the forged tablets, the fire. She remembered Louise's diary, its cryptic reference to a hidden truth. She remembered Miss Johnson's arguments with Carey, her suspicions about the relics, and she remembered Dr. Leidner's nervous glances, his obsession with the dig. Could he be the key, or was it Carey, with his charm and secrets, or Sheila with her fiery temper and connections? Poirot raised the tablet, its surface glinting in the lantern light. "This," he said, "is the final piece. It tells us not of a curse, but of a plan to kill, to deceive, to profit. And it points to one among you." The team froze, their breaths held, as Poirot's gaze settled on each in turn. Amy's heart pounded, her hands clenched, as she waited for the storm to break. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable, until Coleman, The young surveyor broke it with a nervous laugh. "This is madness, Poirot. You're saying one of us is a murderer, setting fires, forging tablets. It's absurd." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Absurd, monsieur. No, it is logical. The little grey cells, they see what the heart denies. And they see you, all of you, for what you are." Amy's gaze flicked to Dr. Leidner, whose hands were now still, his face a mask of resignation. She saw Kara's fingers inch toward his pocket again, and Sheila's eyes dart to the door. Father Lavigny's prayers grew louder, a desperate chant against the rising tide of accusation. And Poirot, calm and unyielding, stood at the center, the eye of the storm. "Mademoiselle Lev," he said suddenly, turning to her, "you have saved artifacts tonight. Yes, you have seen the truth in the ashes. Tell me, what do you see now?" Amy swallowed, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "I see fear, and Poirot, fear in their eyes, in their hands. Someone here is hiding something, and there, terrified you'll find it." Poirot nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "Bean, you are correct, and soon we shall know who." The night stretched on, the tent a crucible of suspicion and dread. Amy stood by Poirot's side, her resolve unshaken. As the storm of truth gathered strength, the killer was close. She could feel it, like the desert wind before a sandstorm. And with Poirot leading the charge, she knew the truth would not stay hidden for long. As the team dispersed, their faces etched with fear and doubt, Amy lingered, her eyes on the charred tablet in Poirot's hand. "M. Poirot," she said softly, "do you know who it is?" He turned to her, his expression enigmatic. "The truth, mademoiselle, is like the desert. It reveals itself only to those who endure its trials. We are close, but we must wait for the final strike." Amy nodded, her heart heavy but determined. The fire had been a setback, but it had also been a revelation. The forged tablet, the team's reactions, Poirot's relentless pursuit, they were all steps toward the truth. She would see this through, for Louise, for Miss Johnson, for the justice that burned brighter than any fire. As she stepped into the cool night air, the desert stretched before her, vast and silent, its secrets buried but not forgotten. The storm was coming, and Amy Letherin was ready to face it. Chapter 9. The Betrayer's Mask. The dawn broke over the Hassany dig with a deceptive calm, the desert air cool and sharp, carrying the faint scent of dust and ancient stone. Nurse Amy Letherin stood at the edge of the camp, her eyes scanning the horizon where the ruins of the ancient Sumerian city lay half buried, their jagged outlines softened by the early light. The events of the past days weighed heavily on her. Louise Leidner's murder, Miss Johnson's poisoning, the whispers of a curse that seemed to coil tighter around the team with each passing hour. Yet, there was a flicker of resolve in her chest, kindled by Hercule Poirot's steady presence and his unshakable belief that the truth, however elusive, could be unearthed. Amy adjusted her scarf against the morning chill and turned back toward the camp. The tents were stirring now, figures moving sluggishly as the team prepared for another day under the shadow of death. Poirot had called for a meeting later that morning, hinting at revelations that might crack the case wide open. Amy's role, he had said, was to observe, to note every glance, every tremor, every unguarded word. "You, Mademoiselle Letherin," he had told her the night before, his eyes glinting in the lamplight, "have the gift of seeing what others overlook. Your heart is honest, and your eyes are clear. Use them." Her boots crunched on the sandy path as she made her way to the mess tent, where the team was gathering for breakfast. The mood was brittle, like a pane of glass ready to shatter. Richard Carey, the handsome assistant archaeologist, sat at one end of the table, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming restlessly on the wooden surface. Across from him, Sheila Riley, the fiery daughter of a local archaeologist, sipped her tea with a studied nonchalance, though her eyes flicked toward Carey more often than necessary. Dr. Eric Leitner, the dig's leader, was absent, reportedly, poring over documents in his tent. The others, Father Lavigny, the quiet epigraphist, and Carl Reiter, the nervous photographer, ate in silence, their faces drawn. Amy took her seat, nodding politely to Sheila, who offered a thin smile. "Sleep well, Nurse Letherin?" Sheila asked, her tone laced with a hint of mockery. "As well as one can in a place like this," Amy replied evenly, pouring herself a cup of strong bitter coffee. She was growing accustomed to Sheila's barbs, sensing they stemmed more from restlessness than malice. Still, Amy's instincts told her to keep Sheila in her sights. The young woman's late-night wanderings near the ruins, coupled with her overheard conversation with Carey about moving the goods, had raised red flags. The conversation at the table was stilted, punctuated by the clink of cutlery and the occasional gust of wind rattling the tent flaps. Father Lavigny murmured something about the need to catalogue the remaining tablets before the dig was inevitably shut down, but no one responded. Carl Reiter dropped his spoon with a clatter, muttering an apology as he scrambled to retrieve it. Amy watched him closely, noting the sheen of sweat on his brow despite the cool morning. He had been jittery since Louise's death, and Poirot had remarked on his reluctance to discuss the photographs he'd taken of the cursed chamber. As breakfast ended, Poirot appeared at the tent's entrance, his small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the disheveled archaeologist's. His mustache was perfectly waxed, his suit improbably pristine despite the desert's relentless dust. "Miss Amos," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority, "I request your presence in the main tent at 10 o'clock. We have much to discuss, and I believe we are nearing the heart of this tragic affair." A murmur rippled through the group, but no one protested. Poirot's reputation preceded him, and his calm assurance seemed to anchor the team, if only for the moment. Amy caught his eye as he turned to leave, and he gave her a slight nod as if to say, "Be ready." The hours before the meeting passed in a blur of routine tasks. Amy checked on the medical supplies, her hands moving mechanically as her mind raced. She couldn't shake the image of the forged tablet they'd found in the ashes of the fire 2 nights ago, a crude imitation of the ancient inscriptions, planted to fuel the curse narrative. Poirot had been tight-lipped about its significance, but his excitement had been palpable. "A mistake, mademoiselle," he'd said, tapping the tablet with a gloved finger. "The killer grows careless, and in carelessness, we find truth." At 10, the team assembled in the main tent, a cavernous space filled with folding chairs and a long table cluttered with maps and artifacts. Poirot stood at the head, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze sweeping over the group like a searchlight. Amy sat near the back, her notebook open, her pencil poised. She felt a prickle of anticipation, as if the air itself were charged with the weight of what was to come. "Madame et Messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate. "We are gathered to confront a darkness that has claimed to lives Madame Louise Leidner and Mademoiselle Johnson. You have spoken of a curse, of ancient vengeance, of spectral figures haunting this desolate place. But I, Hercule Poirot, tell you this. There is no curse. There is only the hand of man, driven by motive, cloaked in deception." A gasp escaped. Sheila quickly stifled. Kara's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. Dr. Leidner, who had slipped into the tent moments before, sat rigid, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. Amy's pencil scratched across the page, recording every detail. Poirot continued, pacing slowly. "Let us begin with Madame Leidner. A woman of beauty, of charm, but also of secrets. Her fear of the curse was genuine, yet it was rooted not in the supernatural but in her past. She spoke of her first husband, Frederick Bosner, a spy she believed, dead, a man she betrayed to the authorities. But what if Bosner did not die? What if he lived, harboring a grudge, waiting for the moment to strike?" The tent was silent, the team hanging on his words. Amy's heart pounded. She had read Louise's diary, its cryptic entries about a shadow from the past. Poirot's theory aligned with those words, but the implications were staggering. Was Bosner among them, hiding in plain sight? Poirot turned to Carey. "Monsieur Carey, you were close to Madame Leidner, perhaps too close, an affair none. You do not deny it, I see. But tell me, did you know of her past? Did you know of Bosner?" Carey's face flushed, but his voice was steady. "I loved Louise. She told me about Bosner, yes, but she said he was dead. I had no reason to doubt her. If you're suggesting I'm involved in her death, you're barking up the wrong tree." Poirot raised a hand, his expression unreadable. "I suggest nothing yet, but let us consider the facts. Madame Leidner was found dead in a locked room, an amulet in her hand, a drop of blood on the floor. The amulet, a Sumerian relic, was placed deliberately, as if to point to the curse. But why? To mislead us, to distract from the true motive." He paused, letting the words sink in. Amy glanced at Dr. Leidner, whose face was pale, his eyes fixed on the floor. She jotted a note, Leid nervous, avoiding eye contact. "Mademoiselle Johnson's death," Poirot went on, "was no less calculated. Poisoned by hydrochloric acid, found near the chamber of the cursed tablets. She argued with Monsieur Carey about those tablets, did she not? Perhaps she knew too much about the relics, about the forgeries, about the killer's plans." Carey shot to his feet. "This is absurd. I didn't kill Louise, and I certainly didn't kill Johnson. Yes, we argued she wanted to move the tablets to Baghdad, said they were too dangerous to stay here, but that's all." "Sit, Monsieur," Poirot said sharply. "Your protests are noted, but we are not finished." Carey sank back into his chair, his fists clenched. Sheila reached out, touching his arm briefly, a gesture Amy caught and recorded. Sheila protective of Carey, complicit. Poirot's gaze shifted to Father Lavigny. "You, Monsieur, are a man of learning, a scholar of ancient scripts. You have studied the tablets closely. Tell me, did you notice anything unusual about the one found in the fire?" Father Lavigny blinked, adjusting his glasses. The tablet was imperfect. The cuneiform was inconsistent, as if carved by an amateur. "I assumed it was a modern creation, perhaps a prank." "A prank?" Poirot's voice was soft, dangerous, or a deliberate act to perpetuate a lie. "The killer has used the curse as a mask, planting false relics, crafting threatening letters, staging ghostly apparitions. But why? To frighten, to divide, to conceal." Amy's mind raced, piecing together the clues. The forged tablet, the letters in ancient script, the shadow she'd seen near the ruins, it all pointed to a human hand, someone within the camp. But who? Her eyes darted to Dr. Leidner, whose silence was deafening. Poirot addressed the group as a whole. "I propose a theory. Madame Leidner's fear of Bosner was not baseless. He lived, and he came here, to this dig, to exact his revenge, but he did not act alone. There is another, a confederate, who aided in the murders, who helped weave the cursed narrative. Together, they have sown chaos, but they have also made mistakes. A murmur of unease swept through the tent. Carl Reiter shifted uncomfortably, his hands twisting in his lap. Amy made another note. Reiter agitated possible guilt. Before Poirot could continue, a shout came from outside. Fire! The storage tent's on fire. The team surged to their feet, rushing toward the door. Amy followed, her heart in her throat. Black smoke billowed from the storage tent where the team kept spare equipment and minor artifacts. Flames licked at the canvas, threatening to spread. Carrie and Sheila grabbed buckets, shouting for water, while Father Lavigny and Reiter hesitated, their faces pale. Amy ran to the water barrels, filling a bucket and joining the effort. Poirot remained at the tent's entrance, his eyes narrowed, watching the chaos unfold. As the team worked frantically, Amy noticed Dr. Leidner standing apart, his expression unreadable. She caught Poirot's eye and he nodded slightly, as if confirming her suspicion. The fire was extinguished after a tense huff-fire, leaving the storage tent a smoldering ruin. Most of the contents were salvageable, but a crate of minor relics had been destroyed. Amy, soaked and exhausted, helped sort through the debris, her hands trembling. Among the ashes, she found a fragment of clay, its surface etched with fresh cuneiform and other forgery. She slipped the fragment into her pocket and approached Poirot, who was speaking quietly with Carrie. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I found something." He excused himself and followed her to a secluded corner of the camp. Amy showed him the fragment, her voice low. "It's like the one from the other fire. Someone's still trying to fool us." Poirot examined the clay, his lips pursing. "Excellent work, mademoiselle. This is no coincidence. The fire was set to destroy evidence or to create it. The killer is desperate, and desperation breeds error." Amy felt a surge of pride, tempered by fear. "What do we do now?" "We watch," Poirot said simply, "and we wait. The betrayer's mask is slipping, and soon it will fall." The afternoon dragged on, the team subdued after the fire. Amy stayed close to Poirot, assisting as he interviewed each member individually. Carrie was defiant, insisting his only crime was loving Louise. Sheila was evasive, claiming she'd been nowhere near the storage tent when the fire started. Father Lavigny spoke at length about the tablets, his knowledge encyclopedic but his demeanor oddly detached. Reiter was a nervous wreck, stammering through his account of the morning's events. Dr. Leidner was the last to be questioned. He met Poirot in his tent, Amy present as a witness. The archaeologist looked haggard, his eyes shadowed, his hands unsteady. "What do you want from me, Poirot?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I've lost my wife, my colleague. Isn't that enough?" Poirot's expression was unyielding. "Monsieur Leidner, you loved your wife, yet you knew of her past with Bosna. Did you ever suspect he lived? Did you ever see him?" Leidner shook his head, but his eyes darted away. "No. She told me he was dead. I believed her. And the relics," Poirot pressed, "the cursed tablets, the hidden chamber, your obsession with them is well known. Did you find something that threatened you? Something that drove you to act?" Leidner's face twisted. "You're accusing me of murder. My own wife. You're mad." "I accuse no one," Poirot said calmly. "But I seek the truth. And the truth, monsieur, is that someone in this camp is not who they claim to be." Leidner fell silent, his shoulders slumping. Amy watched him closely, her instinct screaming that he was hiding something. She made a mental note to search his tent later, if Poirot approved. As evening fell, Amy slipped away from the camp, her nerves taut. She needed a moment alone to process the day's events. The ruins loomed in the distance, their silhouettes stark against the twilight sky. She wandered closer, drawn by a strange impulse, her hand brushing the fragment in her pocket. A rustle behind her made her freeze. She turned, her heart racing, but saw only shadows. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer came, but the air felt heavy, oppressive. Amy backed away, her eyes scanning the darkness. A figure emerged from behind a crumbling wall, a man, his face obscured by a scarf. She gasped, stumbling backward, her foot catching on a stone. Before she could scream, the figure lunged, a glint of metal in his hand. Amy dodged, her nurse's training kicking in, and scrambled toward the camp, shouting for help. Footsteps pounded behind her, but the camp's lights were close now, and voices answered her cries. Carrie reached her first, his face pale. "Amy, what happened?" "Someone out there," she panted, pointing toward the ruins. "He had a knife." Poirot appeared, his expression grim. "Stay with her, Monsieur Carrie. I will investigate." He returned minutes later, his face unreadable. "The assailant is gone, but I found this." He held up a scarf, embroidered with a faint initial, E. Amy's blood ran cold. "Eric Lotner, perhaps," Poirot said softly. "Or perhaps another deception. We must be cautious, mademoiselle." That night, Amy couldn't sleep, her mind replaying the attack. She sat in her tent, her notebook open, scribbling her thoughts. The scarf, the forged tablets, Leidner's evasiveness, it all pointed to him, yet something felt off. She recalled Louise's diary, its mention of a hidden truth in her room. On impulse, she lit a lantern and crept to Louise's tent. which had been sealed since her death. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of perfume and dust. Amy searched carefully, her hands trembling as she checked drawers, shelves, and the bed frame. Under the mattress her fingers brushed something hard, a small wooden box, locked but fragile. She pried it open, revealing a bundle of letters tied with string. Her breath caught as she read the first one, dated months before Louise's death. It was from Frederick Bosner, his words dripping with venom. "You thought you could escape me, but I am closer than you know." The letters detailed his survival, his new identity, his plan to confront her. One line chilled Amy to the core. "Your husband is not who he seems." She stuffed the letters into her coat and hurried to Poirot's tent, her heart pounding. He was awake, reading by lamplight. "Mademoiselle," he said, rising. "What is it?" She handed him the letters, her voice shaking. "I found these in Louise's room." Bosner was alive and he knew Dr. Leitner. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he read, his fingers tracing the words, "Magnifique, mademoiselle. This is the key we needed. Bosner is here, and he has played a long game, but we are not yet at checkmate." He paced, his mind clearly racing. "Tomorrow, we confront the team again, but first, we must ensure your safety. The attack tonight was no accident. The killer knows you are close to the truth." Amy nodded, her resolve hardening. "I'm not backing down, Monsieur Poirot. Louise trusted me, and I won't let her down." Poirot smiled, a rare warmth in his eyes. "You are a woman of courage, mademoiselle. Together, we will unmask the betrayer." The next morning, the team gathered once more, the tension palpable. Poirot stood before them, the letters in his hand, his voice commanding. "Mies Amos, we have reached the end of this charade. Madame Leitner's killer is among us, as is her first husband, Frederick Bosner. He did not die, but lived, and came here to exact his revenge." Gasps filled the tent. Dr. Leitner's face drained of color, his hands trembling. Amy watched him closely, her notebook forgotten, her eyes locked on his every move. Poirot held up the letters. "These were found in Madame Leitner's room, written by Bosner. They speak of betrayal, of a husband who is not what he seems. Monsieur Leitner, you have been silent too long. Tell us, who are you?" Leitner rose, his voice shaking. "I am Eric Leitner, as I've always been. These letters, they're lies, fabrications." Louise was paranoid, seeing ghosts where there were none. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, the letters are real, as is the scarf found near the ruins last night, marked with your initial," explained Monsieur. Leitner faltered his eyes, darting to the door. Before he could speak, Sheila stood, her voice sharp. "Enough, Poirot. You're hounding an innocent man. Eric loved Louise. He wouldn't hurt her." Poirot turned to her, his gaze piercing. "And you, Mademoiselle Riley, you defend him fiercely. Why? Because you are his ally, or because you, too, have secrets?" Sheila flushed, her hands clenching. "I've nothing to hide. I'm here for the dig, nothing more." Amy's mind flashed to the overheard conversation, Sheila and Carey discussing goods. She leaned toward Poirot, whispering, "Sheila and Carey were planning to sell relics. Could they be involved?" Poirot nodded subtly, then addressed Carey. "Monsieur Carey, you have admitted to an affair with Madame Leitner, but what of your dealings with Mademoiselle Riley? A plan to profit from stolen artifacts, perhaps? Did Madame Leitner discover this and pay the price?" Carey's face darkened. "I told you, I loved Louise. Yes, Sheila and I talked about selling some minor pieces, nothing important, just trinkets. But murder, never." Poirot's voice softened, but his words cut deep. "Love, monsieur, can drive men to madness. Or perhaps it was not love, but fear that Madame Leitner would expose you, or that Bosner would destroy you all." The tent was silent, the team frozen in place. Amy's eyes flicked to Dr. Leitner, who seemed to shrink under Poirot's gaze. She felt a sudden certainty, a clarity that had eluded her until now. Leitner's silence, his obsession with the relics, his reaction to the letters, it all pointed to one truth. Poirot stepped forward, his voice ringing out. "Monsieur Carey, you are not the killer. Your heart is guilty of infidelity, but not of murder. No, the betrayer's mask belongs to another." He turned to Dr. Leitner, his finger pointing like a blade. "You, monsieur, are not Eric Leitner. You are Frederick Bosner, the man who survived, who remarried his own wife under a false name, who wove a web of lies to trap her in your vengeance." The tent erupted in chaos. Leitner staggered back, his face ashen. "No, you're wrong. I'm not." Poirot cut him off, his voice relentless. "You forged the tablets, planted the amulet, wrote the letters to terrify your wife. You killed her in a locked room, using your knowledge of the camp to stage the perfect crime. And when Mademoiselle Johnson grew suspicious, you poisoned her, hoping to silence her forever." Leitner's eyes were wild, his voice a desperate plea. "You can't prove it. It's all conjecture." Poirot held up the scarf, the letters, the forged fragment. "These are not conjecture, monsieur. They are evidence. And your own actions betray you. The attack on Mademoiselle Letherin last night, your scarf, your desperation to stop her from uncovering the truth." Amy's heart pounded, her eyes locked on Leitner. The team was silent, their faces a mix of shock and horror. Sheila sank into her chair, her defiance crumbling. Carey stared at Leidner, his expression unreadable. Leidner's shoulders slumped, his voice barely a whisper. I loved her, but she betrayed me. She thought she could escape, but I found her. I became Eric Leidner, built a life with her, but the past it never lets go. Poirot's voice was gentle now, almost pitying. And so you killed her, monsieur. Not a curse, not a ghost, but a man consumed by hate. Leidner collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands. The tent was silent, the weight of his confession suffocating. Amy felt a surge of relief, tempered by sorrow. Louise's death, Miss Johnson's, they were senseless, born of a twisted heart. Poirot turned to the team. The case is closed. Mies Amos, Monsieur Leidner Bosner will face justice. The dig will end, and the curse will fade, a myth dispelled by truth. He looked at Amy, his eyes warm. Mademoiselle Letherin, you have been my ally, my eyes in this darkness. You have my gratitude. Amy nodded, her throat tight. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I wish it could have ended differently. He placed a hand on her shoulder, as do we all. But justice is served, and that is enough. As the team dispersed, Amy lingered, watching as Leidner was led away, his head bowed. The desert stretched before her, vast and unyielding, its secrets buried once more. She felt a strange peace, a sense of closure. The betrayer's mask had fallen, and she was ready to leave this place behind. Chapter 10. The final revelation. The desert sun hung low, casting long jagged shadows across the archaeological dig at Hassani. The air was thick with dust and anticipation, as if the ancient ruins themselves held their breath for what was to come. Nurse Amy Letherin stood near the main tent, her hands clasped tightly, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. The past days had been a whirlwind of death, suspicion, and cryptic clues, and now, with Hercule Poirot at the helm, the truth seemed tantalizingly close. The camp was abuzz, the team gathered under the canvas roof, their faces a mosaic of fear, guilt, and curiosity. Poirot stood at the center, his small, meticulous frame commanding the space despite the oppressive heat. His mustache twitched slightly, a telltale sign of the mental gears turning beneath his composed exterior. Amy admired his calm, his ability to see through the chaos of human motives and ancient curses. She glanced at the assembled group. Richard Carey, his handsome features taut with unease. Sheila Riley, the archaeologist's daughter, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Leidner, pale and withdrawn, his hands fidgeting with a notebook, and the others workers, assistants, and scholars each carrying their own secrets, their own stakes, in this deadly puzzle. Miss Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. We are gathered here to unmask a killer who is hidden behind the veil of an ancient curse, a myth woven to deceive. But Hercule Poirot does not believe in curses. He believes in the truth, and the truth, it is always human. Amy's pulse quickened. She had seen Poirot's methods unfold over the past days, his questions piercing like arrows, his observations sharp as the desert wind. Louise Leidner's death, her body found in a locked room, a Sumerian amulet in her hand had been the first shock. Miss Johnson's poisoning by hydrochloric acid near the cursed tablets had deepened the terror. The team had been fractured, each member eyeing the others with suspicion, while the whispers of a vengeful deity echoed through the camp. But Poirot had dismissed the supernatural, focusing instead on the tangible, motives, opportunities, and lies. Let us begin with Madame Leidner, Poirot said, pacing slowly, his eyes scanning the group. A woman of beauty, charm, and tragedy. She spoke of visions, of a ghostly face at her window, resembling her late husband, Frederick Bosner. She feared an ancient curse tied to the relics we unearthed. But was it the curse that killed her? None, Miss Amos. It was a human hand, guided by a motive as old as these sands. But Amy shifted, recalling Louise's diary. Its pages filled with cryptic references to Bosner, a man she had loved and betrayed years ago as a spy. The diary had hinted at a hidden truth, a phrase Poirot had latched onto. Amy had handed it to him, her hands trembling, feeling the weight of its secrets. Now, as Poirot spoke, she sensed the net tightening around the killer. Madame Leidner's death was no accident, Poirot continued. She was found in a locked room, a drop of blood on the floor, an amulet in her hand. The amulet, it was placed there deliberately, a clue to mislead us. And the letter, written in what appeared to be ancient script, was it truly from the past? Nan, it was a forgery, crafted to fuel the myth of the curse. The tent was silent, save for the faint rustle of canvas in the breeze. Dr. Leidner's hand stilled, his eyes fixed on Poirot. Amy noticed her instincts sharpened by days of vigilance. She had promised Louise she would stay alert, and now, standing beside Poirot, she felt a surge of purpose. She had failed to save Louise, but she could help bring her justice. Let us consider the second death, Poirot said, his voice rising slightly. Mademoiselle Johnson, poisoned by hydrochloric acid, found near the hidden chamber. A woman, of intellect, yet consumed by jealousy. She argued with Monsieur Carey about the relics. Yes, she suspected something, perhaps too much. Her death was meant to silence her, but it spoke to Poirot instead. Carey's jaw tightened, his gaze dropping to the ground. Sheila Riley crossed her arms, her lips pressed thin. Amy remembered overhearing their hushed conversation about selling relics illegally. A thread Poirot had yet to pull fully. The fire that nearly destroyed the artifacts, the cave-in that trapped them in the chamber. All pointed to a calculated effort to obscure the truth. But Poirot, with his relentless logic, was unraveling it step by step. The relics, Poirot said, gesturing toward the crates stacked at the tent's edge. They are at the heart of this mystery. Inscriptions warning of divine retribution. Tablets depicting a vengeful deity. But these, too, were tampered with. A forged tablet, found in the ashes of the fire, was meant to deepen the curse's shadow. And who would have the knowledge to create such a forgery? Who would benefit from the chaos it sowed? Amy's mind raced. Dr. Leidner, the celebrated archaeologist, had been obsessed with the relics. His passion for the dig had seemed genuine, but Poirot's words cast it in a new light. She thought of the hidden compartment in Louise's room, the letters proving Dr. Leidner knew of Bosna's survival. Could he have orchestrated this elaborate deception? Her stomach twisted at the thought. Poirot turned, his eyes locking onto Dr. Leidner. Monsieur Leidner, you have been a man of many faces, a scholar, a leader, a husband. But there is another face, is there not? A face from the past, one that Madame Leidner feared above all others. The tent seemed to shrink, the air growing heavier. Dr. Leidner's face paled further, his notebook slipping to the ground. Amy's breath caught. She had seen his nervous glances, his guarded responses. Poirot's summation was no mere performance. It was a trap, and Dr. Leidner was caught in its jaws. Let us speak of Frederick Bosna, Poirot said, his voice low but piercing. A man betrayed by his wife Louise during the war. A spy, presumed dead, but what if he survived? What if he returned, under a new name, with a new purpose? To marry the woman who betrayed him, to build a life with her, only to discover her heart belonged to another Monsieur Carey. Carey flinched, his hands clenching. Sheila Riley gasped, her eyes wide. The team murmured, shock rippling through them. Amy's mind spun, piecing together the clues, the letters, the amulet, the forged tablets. It was a narrative of vengeance, not a curse, but a man's rage. Monsieur Leidner, Poirot said, stepping closer, or should I say, Monsieur Bosna, you survived the war. You took a new identity, became the esteemed Dr. Eric Leidner. You married Louise, but her affair with Carey rekindled old wounds. You crafted the curse, forged the tablets, planted the amulet, and wrote the threatening letter to terrify her. And when that was not enough, you killed her, in a locked room, with a precision only a husband could achieve. Dr. Leidner stood, abruptly, his chair scraping against the ground. This is absurd, he cried, his voice cracking. I loved Louise. I would never silence. Monsieur Poirot interrupted, his tone unyielding. You killed Mademoiselle Johnson as well, when she grew too close to the truth. The hydrochloric acid, taken from the lab, was your weapon. The cavern, the fire, these were your attempts to destroy evidence, to bury your crimes beneath the sands. Amy's heart pounded. She remembered the amulet in Louise's hand, its odd placement. Poirot had noted it immediately, suspecting it was staged. The letters in the hidden compartment, the forged tablet, they all pointed to Dr. Leidner. But could he truly be Bosna? The thought was staggering. Yet the pieces fit with chilling clarity. Poirot produced a small bundle of papers, Louise's letters, retrieved from the hidden compartment. These, he said, holding them aloft, prove you knew of Bosna's survival. You wrote to Louise, pretending to be him, to torment her. You used your knowledge of Sumerian script to create the illusion of a curse. But the truth, it is not so ancient. It is as modern as jealousy, as vengeance. Dr. Leidner's shoulders slumped, his face crumpling. The team stared horrified, as the man they had trusted unraveled before them. Amy felt a pang of pity, mingled with disgust. Louise had feared a ghost, but the true monster was her husband. I couldn't let her go, Leidner whispered, his voice barely audible. She betrayed me once, and then again with Carey. I thought the curse would scare her, make her cling to me. But it wasn't enough. She was going to leave me. The confession hung in the air, a heavy, bitter truth. Poirot nodded, his expression somber but resolute. You killed her, Monsieur and Mademoiselle Johnson, who suspected your forgeries. You used the relics, the very history you claimed to cherish, to mask your crimes. Leidner collapsed back into his chair, his hands covering his face. The team was silent, the weight of his guilt settling over them like dust. Amy felt a surge of relief, tempered by sorrow. Louise and Miss Johnson were gone, but their killer would face justice. Poirot turned to the team. The curse of Hassani is no more. It was a fabrication, a tool of manipulation. The relics will be studied, the truth preserved. But this dig, it is finished, he signaled to the local authorities, who had been summoned discreetly. 2 officers stepped forward, their faces grim, and took Dr. Leidner into custody. He offered no resistance, his spirit broken. As they led him away, the camp seemed to exhale, the tension dissipating like a storm passing over the desert. Amy stood outside the tent, watching the horizon as the sun dipped lower. The desert stretched endlessly before her, its secrets both ancient and human. She thought of Louise, her fear, her fragility, and of Miss Johnson, whose sharp mind had been silenced too soon. She felt a quiet pride in her role, however small. In bringing the truth to light, Poirot joined her, his hat tilted against the fading light. "You did well, Mademoiselle Letherin," he said, his voice gentle. "Your courage, your observations, they were invaluable." Amy smiled faintly, her throat tight. "I just wish I could have saved her." Poirot nodded, his eyes kind. "We cannot save all, but we can seek justice. And you have done that." As the camp began to pack up, the relics crated for transport, Amy felt a weight lift. The curse was a lie, the killer exposed. She was ready to leave the desert, to carry its lessons with her. Poirot, ever the wanderer, tipped his hat and walked toward the horizon, his silhouette small against the vastness. New mysteries awaited him, but for Amy, this chapter was closed. She turned, her boots crunching on the sand, and headed toward the future, stronger for it.